A night in with MauLer and the drinker, getting trashed with the web screen thinkers. A cheap night cause I'm feeling kinda thrifty, got a 10-pack of beers and a bottle of whiskey. Hop up the cork, have a glass of wine, but they'll say I'll be fine. Trouble walking in a straight line, but pour me a Pinot Noir. It's open bar with our hosts, MauLer and the critical drinker.
All right, hello everybody. Woo! Welcome to Open Bar.
Yes.
How is everyone doing this evening? MauLer, how are you? That's what I want to know.
Wonderfully. Spent a good 3.5, 4 hours playing Star Wars Bounty Hunter before this stream. Whenever I stream a video game before, like on the same day Open Bar's happening, everyone floods the stream with like, "Wow, I guess Open Bar's not happening then, huh?" I guess. I guess. I'm just like, no, I'll just stop.
Yeah, it's like that's the crazy thing about video games. You can just stop them whenever you want to. It's great.
You can turn them off. It's
a
new device, but wonderful. Anyway, it's from an era where they made Star Wars games that weren't cringe. It's back in the day. Because while I was playing it, I was polling the audience whether or not they want me to check out Star Wars Outlaws, which I don't know if you've seen any gameplay for it, but it looks pathetic.
I saw the main character and I thought, nah, that's mildly terrifying.
It's funny, as his audience are like split down the middle of whether or not they want him to stream it. It's like you can tell half of them are like, stay away from it. The other half are like, I want to see you suffer. So it's a complicated bit of pull and push, but we'll see.
I mean, if it's garnering a lot of attention, people might be curious to hear your thoughts on it. So,
people are half expecting a Suicide Squad situation.
I would.
It'll depend on the writing. The thing is, they're not dealing with a whole bunch of famous, beloved characters. They're not shooting Batman on a bench with Harley Quinn. They're not doing that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah. Well, anyway, as has become the tradition, it's time to talk a little bit about the year that was 2006. In this case, it being Open Bar 106. But I'm going to start on a bit of a downer. This was the year in which Steve Irwin died. Still hurts. I'm sorry. Also, in equally bad news, Pluto was downgraded from a planet to a dwarf planet, which I'm still sore about. Actually, it's quite the injustice as far as I'm concerned.
Those two bits of news at once. That's terrible.
It was a rough year. It really was. Also, it was the year in which Twitter was launched. Although back then it was called Twitter because there was no E in it. But okay. Fair enough. That was the year in which it began. So it's been almost 20 years that it's been going now. Yeah. What else did we have? The first Mac Pro was released in August of that year, and Google purchased YouTube for $1.6 billion, which is kind of a steal back then, actually, of 2006. Yeah, that's actually the year that I first created my account way back when. Wow. It's been almost 20 years that I've had a YouTube account, but I didn't actually make any content for it for like 5 years. I don't know why I had it, actually. It was probably just to like
watch stuff on things. Like normal people.
I suppose so. Yeah, you kind of needed a channel, didn't you? You needed some kind of account with it. On lighter news, it was also the year in which the PS3 and the Nintendo Wii were launched. So, not bad. In terms of movies, though, excuse me, top movies of the year: Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, with $1 billion, which was pretty good going.
The first three, everyone says, you know what? It's nice that we got those. Don't really talk about 4 and 5 that much.
Let's not think about it. Yeah, it was a great trilogy, and that's all we need to know. Interestingly, second place was Da Vinci Code. That was the second biggest movie of the year, 760 million. Ice Age: The Meltdown was third. Casino Royale, a return to form for the Bond movies. I remember it. It was a great movie, and Daniel Craig was in it.
He was.
Night in the Museum was fifth, but it was also the year that gave us X-Men: The Last Stand, Mission Impossible 3, The Departed. You might be, Talladega Nights, which was one of the last really good Will Ferrell movies, I think. Got a soft spot for that one. Rocky Balboa, I've got an equal soft spot for that. V for Vendetta, pretty decent movie.
Yeah.
Apocalypto, I quite liked it. I think.
All you, whenever you list this shit at this era, I'm like, fucking hell, the variety,
I know, this is it. The Prestige as well. You're probably familiar with that one. Children of Men and and truly the greatest movie of the year, Snakes on a Plane. Which,
hey man, you know, I'd be happy for films like that to be releasing if we had more of everything else.
Yeah, but yeah, like it's always an eclectic mix, I suppose. And you know, it was nice to see. This was, I suppose, still a few years before the MCU started to kick off. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that changes after 2008.
Late 90s, 2000s, it was a weird set of years. We had some grotesquely horrible entries, but also some really surprising experimental ones that were cool.
Yeah, I liked it.
Was a fun time.
I really did. Yeah, I liked it. Anyway, enough waffle from us. I suppose we should bring on our guests to discuss the news of the week.
They're getting cold out there. You gotta open the doors.
I know. Join us at the bar, gentlemen. So first up, we have got Chris Gore from Film Threat and Disparu. Welcome, gentlemen. Great to have you back as always.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's good to be on. Especially as today I've spent the day going through the SDCC panels about Star Trek. And after going through that, I definitely need a drink. Section 31 is one of my favorite things about Star Trek because it's actually kind of moral complexity done well. And they've just described their new movie as Guardians of the Galaxy 3 on steroids and how it's going to be funny and romantic. And I'm like, what on earth are you talking about? So it's like, I'm in a living hell right now.
I honestly would like to hear more about this, like slightly later in the stream, because I want to know the latest developments in the world of Star Trek. I did hear that they were going to be doing like a Star Trek comedy TV show, and I thought that's perfect because
I covered that as
essentially all of modern Star Trek is a joke. So,
do you know the writer of that? It's the same writer as Dear White People.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Can't wait.
Imagine my shock. We should also bring in our final guest as well. This is our special guest for the evening because this is making his debut on the open bar. He needs no introduction, really. He's an absolute legend in the world of comic books. It is Mr. Mark Millar. Welcome, sir. Welcome aboard. Good to have you here. It's we did a happy hour. Gosh, it was a couple of years now, actually, that we did it. But you've never been on open bar because I don't think open bar even existed back then. So it's great to have you back.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Can you get? There's some diversity quote here, like it's 40% Scotsman. This is amazing.
Well, we're like an underrepresented minority on YouTube, I think. So I'm glad we can represent. You know.
I mean, it's called open bar. You'd expect it more often, to be honest.
Thing is, I'm like the gatekeeper for it, so I've got to keep the undesirables out, you know.
Keep inviting English people in, and the Welsh.
80% British, yeah. What's going on here? Poor Chris.
I know. I'm trying to unify the country, you know. What can I say? And I bring in the occasional American as well, so it's all right.
Can I just give a warning to anybody who's thinking about getting glasses? Like, my whole life, I've never needed glasses until a few months ago. And my optician says, you might need them for reading, but that's kind of it. So I got to 54 without needing glasses, and he lied. My eyesight's fallen off a cliff ever since. So I can't even see you guys unless I have these on. So never trust opticians. They try to sell you glasses.
Because they say your eyes get dependent on them, don't they? So like they're not getting used as much by themselves. It's like
that's nonsense.
There's a long time glasses wearer. I tried to resist ever getting glasses, but I had like my collection of, I think it was Simpsons and Futurama and stuff when I was about, I want to say 14 or something. I couldn't read them anymore from where I was, and I was like, And then, my parents were like, why don't you just try it? And when I got home and put them on and everything was crystal clear, I was like, I'm never taking this off. It's like,
there are a lot of streams where I don't wear glasses, and people don't know, like, everyone is just blurry to me. I record videos where I'm reading stuff, and it's just blurry. I just concentrate more. So, yeah, I think it's more because you don't realize how bad your eyes are. You just get used to it.
I think I noticed it in school where it's like I couldn't see the writing on the blackboard so well if I was sat at the back of class, and then like I just had to sit further and further forward to be able to see it. Like, no, I don't like this.
I thought it was like Voldemort. You know, if you get to 54 without needing glasses, I thought that's me, I'm fine. And then bam, it just gets you, you know. So hopefully the hair stays.
I spend way too much time online to have not needed glasses by this point.
I just wonder how useless we would have been, like, as this sort of lack of mutation or whatever the fuck that makes your eyes shitter than other people's. How bad that would be in like hunter-gatherer time. Just like, well, I ain't throwing spears at nothing.
Did it just not happen as much back then? Like, because people weren't staring at screens and stuff all day. Did people just not suffer from short-sightedness as much, or did they just end up like walking over cliffs or something, or like getting eaten by like the nearest saber-toothed tiger because they didn't see it coming? So it kind of solved itself, that problem.
The human brain is incredibly flexible. Like when you look at black cabs in London, they actually have a bit of the brain which is enlarged because they have to do the knowledge. They have to remember all the road names. And I found when I was playing the video game Squad, you were literally shooting at things which are like 1 or 2 pixels off in the distance. And I remember I played that way too much over the course of like 3 days. I barely slept. And when I went outside, literally anything that moved was attracting my attention. You can definitely train yourself to be hyper aware of things. So it's probably the same with hunter gatherers.
Don't they say that as well? Like it was like that meme of like a guy is sent to like look for like a bottle of like drain cleaner or something underneath the sink, can't find it even though it's right in front of him. But like then there's like him playing Counter-Strike or something. And it's like sniper in the bushes 500 yards away. Like it's like he's trained his brain to look for the important things in life.
It's what we were made for.
Yeah. But anyway, well, welcome aboard, gentlemen. I guess the first thing I was kind of curious to talk about, which seems to have been the big news of the week that came out of San Diego Comic-Con, was Robert Downey Jr. is returning to the MCU. And everyone clapped and cheered. But I didn't really feel the same way. It honestly felt like a weird decision to make at a time when Deadpool and Wolverine is dominating the headlines at the moment with, like, cleaning up at the box office, doing way better than I think anyone anticipated, considering it's a superhero movie in 2024. Feels like something that's like sucked the wind out of its sails a little bit. Like now everyone's talking about, well, Tony Stark's coming back to the MCU. It seemed like a bit of an odd choice to do it at this particular time. I guess I was kind of curious to hear you guys' thoughts on it and what it means going forward.
I think it's I've wavered on this like by the hour, right? You know how I feel about this. But when I first heard it, I was, that's really exciting. And then I was thinking, well, it's not exactly from a position of strength. It has a never say never, Sean Connery and never say never again kind of vibe, isn't it? But it's a similar amount of time he'll have been gone by the time he comes back. So it was very exciting to see Connery back as Bond. But now there's a part of me actually does kind of like the idea as well. Like it's very comic booky, isn't it? The idea of it being a variant Tony Stark or whatever, and it might. Fantastic Four's tried several movies in the past that have all failed. Like none of these movies have really quite worked. Maybe the way Spider-Man Homecoming had that Tony Stark magic in there, maybe it just needs that little bit of juice that he could bring to it to make Fantastic Four work. But I do feel we're over the hump of people being really excited about these things. And now it's the bag of tricks a little bit, isn't it? Like not comic book movies, but superhero movies. We're 25 years into this. I mean, that's a quarter of the time cinema's been around. I mean, that's ridiculous, isn't it? That superheroes has been the dominant beast for 25 years. So should it go beyond 30? Probably not. It's maybe time for something else. And we're back to just our old favorites now, I think.
I mean, it's interesting that you used the Sean Connery comparison, because he didn't want to do it and he was only brought back to play Bond with a huge amount of money. They had to pay him a lot of money to do Never Say Never Again.
Well, it's the same here though.
I wonder if they did the same with Robert here.
Well, they offered him over 80. We know it's over 80 because they offered the Russo brothers 80 and they offered Robert Downey Jr. significantly more than 80.
That's obscene.
Plus
perks.
Plus perks. Yeah. Lots of perks.
No wonder he was smiling so much. Like if I just made $80 million for doing like 2 movies, I'd be a happy camper as well.
Imagine he was still partying. It'd be amazing. Robert Downey Jr. with 80 million on a Friday night. You'd be like, this is going to be fantastic.
I mean,
I'll go right to your mansion, Robert. The coke's on you.
One of the things he asked for was, what did they say? It wasn't a fleet, but it was something like that. A fleet of, what do they live in? Like the trailers? Like an encampment of trailers?
Camp, yeah.
Like, what on earth is he using them all for? That's what I'm more interested in, like the aspect of the outside of the movie. What he needs all these things for.
Maybe they Voltron together and make a mansion or something.
Yeah, he's going to live there forever. But like Variety did say that he was the one that wanted the Russo brothers involved, and he wouldn't go back unless the Russo brothers were in on this thing. So it kind of seems like Disney were just we'll give you anything. We're desperate. We're going to give you anything you want. We're going to give you any amount of money you want. We just need you. And that kind of desperation kind of implies that they weren't sure about Wolverine in the first place. They didn't know it was going to be this big hit or whatever. And so they just saw SDCC coming and needed some kind of announcement for it. And the thing is, if you look at the Russo brothers, they were leading the Citadel at Amazon. It was going to be Amazon's pinnacle series. It was going to be international with an American one, loads of spin-offs around the world. It was going to be bigger than Rings of Power. And it died. And they were the ones in charge of it. And so after seeing what's happened with Doctor Who, I'm not sure if you bring back all these people, you're going to end up with the product that you would have done back in their heyday.
Going back is always difficult. I mean, I think for any of us, when you go back to something, it's usually a sign of weakness. It's going to safe ground when something else hasn't quite worked. But at the same time, can I say one other positive? When I come on these things, I always sound so positive, and yet in real life, I'm always moaning about these things. But
I mean, you're Scottish, it's expected.
Yeah, that's true. Here's the positive on it, though, is I think the fact that they've gone back to the Russo brothers and gone back to Robert Downey Jr. and so on makes me think that they realised they screwed up. And that actually, this is as close as Hollywood comes to admitting there was a problem. And for 5 years, everybody's been gaslit about, no, you're the problem. The movies are fantastic, Whereas I think this is a realization we have to do a very fast pivot here. And I kind of like that because it means we're maybe going to get some stuff we love again.
I do like the reaction. You just looked to Robert's right there. Oh, sorry, like our left. Like that reaction just says, oh
no. I have to make a good movie.
The most interesting part of the reveal to me is after he did the whole Iron Man kind of reveal, and then he looked to his right or left and then winked at them. It was like, I told you this. There was, I don't know which came first. It was either the Sherlock or Iron Man, whichever one came afterwards. He said he got the job because he just handed in sort of the box office receipts to the previous movie when they said, why should we cast you in this? And I think that's essentially what he's done here.
I think Sherlock came off the back of Iron Man because that was very much the movie that rejuvenated his career. Like he was pretty much down and out in terms of Hollywood draw appeal. But that really got him back on top. And we've seen the footage of everyone reacting and just absolutely losing their minds in the audience when he was unveiled. But then a lot of me thinks that was just the shock of seeing Robert Downey Jr. suddenly there. Like there was not any real thought put into like, well, what does this mean? How is this going to translate on screen? And it just feels like a very quick fix. Like, isn't it cool that Robert Downey Jr. is back and he's not playing the role that you expected? But maybe he actually will be.
Have you heard the video? There's one video that was the main one that went viral on the Sunday. And just before the reveal, there's some guy going, I bet it's Robert Downey Jr. It totally kills it dead. It's fantastic.
I was in the room with Gary from Nerdrotic. We were right off to the right of the stage and saw it all live. I saw the whole Marvel presentation. We'll talk more about that later. But what was interesting was those Marvel panels lay out a plan. We're doing this movie and then this movie and this character. Here's a Disney Plus show. Kevin Feige came out and bragged at the top that all the Marvel movies collectively have made $30 billion. Not a small feat. And especially in light of Lucasfilm's failure to really get momentum with Star Wars, no movies in 5 years. But they did something different. They did not show that grid that was absent. They did not announce any new Disney Plus shows. They said, we're going to talk about 4 movies, and that was it. And we saw the, Thunderbolts looks bad. Looks like a Disney Plus show or dollar store Suicide Squad. Captain America, and that looks awful. We've all seen it. We saw a scene with Harrison Ford as Red Hulk, whatever. The most promising thing was Fantastic Four. That looked pretty good. But the Robert Downey Jr. reveal, I'd heard about it a month ago. It was like, we'll see. I heard it was going to be a end credit scene to Fantastic Four, but they just put it out there. I think we're going to get a year of bad Marvel stuff. TV shows. You got Agatha. You've got Ironheart. These 2 movies. FF, we'll see. They've never made a good FF movie. I'm a huge fan. It was my gateway comic. Love it. and I like what they showed. We can discuss that later. We'll see how Robert Downey Jr. will be used. Is he a variant of Tony Stark? Is he just an actor playing a different character? So whatever it is, I think it's interesting. What he said, if you saw his Instagram post, he said, new mask, same task.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Is he the same sort of slightly paranoid Tony Stark gone dark, that he wants to put a shield around the Earth, and protect it from outside galactic cosmic forces, but in an evil way? It is interesting, but they need something. I know, I do know people who work at Marvel. They have cleaned house. They quietly months ago fired all the producers that could be labeled activist.
Really?
Yes. Unlike Lucasfilm is lost. They're lost. Right. That's it. They are doubling down on all the nonsense, right? You will never get anything good out of Lucasfilm and Star Wars. That's it. Kevin Feige recognizes he even I'm not going to say exactly. Basically, he said that we tried it. It didn't work. He's talking about phase 4.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. We tried it. Didn't work. No Kang. None of these side characters that don't have the legacy of classic characters. And if Deadpool and Wolverine proves anything, you've heard that phrase, male and pale is stale. That was spoken aloud across studios. But if you look at box office this year, I would say male and pale is money. Mm-hmm. And that's the phrase that I think people should more adopt. But they got rid of
the audience is men. So, why would you ever say that male is state? It doesn't make any sense just from a basic capitalism point of view, let alone anything else.
Insult your audience.
Just because it rhymed, everybody thought that was really good.
Right, yeah, it's just it's a nice little sound bite. But they've tried so hard over the past 5 years to get more women into Marvel movies and to really appeal to them. But it's your core audience, unfortunately, is always going to be male. There's definitely going to be female fans, but your main audience for this kind of movie is always going to be men. And if you don't appeal to them, and if you actively insult them, well, guess what happens? Suddenly your movies aren't making $1 billion anymore. Suddenly you're getting things like the Marvels, which are struggling to make 200 million.
Right. Additionally, they fired people that don't know the comics.
Mm-hmm. Well, these are all good steps. How are we not hearing more about this, though?
But it's going to be a sea change that will take years. That's why they're announcing this now. We know we screwed up and failed, but look at what's coming. So we're gonna get 2 bad movies, 2 bad TV shows, and maybe a good Fantastic Four film. So sorry to interrupt you, Drinker, but
all the articles said that they don't have a script for Robert Downey Jr.'s movie right now.
Yes, that's true.
It's very early.
Well, I'd heard rumors that essentially this was going to be a variant of Tony Stark from a different reality that's being mind controlled by Dr. Doom. So Dr. Doom himself is actually going to be a separate character, but he's taken control of Tony Stark to carry out his plans. And it's basically a roundabout way of bringing Tony back, because eventually he's going to get freed from this mind control and you're going to have Tony Stark back, or at least an alternate variant.
Pray to God that is not what's happening. I can visualize my wife's face in 2026 looking round at me in the cinema saying, "Why did you bring me here?" I can, if they go that route, you've got to just keep it simple, haven't you? I mean, to me, the one thing I don't know how many of you guys have read Secret Wars, where you've got this big Marvel crossover, a big Avengers Doomsday type movie and everything, but where he comes in and saves the day at one point, and I can see that kind of thing, Tony Stark being a noble Doctor Doom type figure and everything. There's a lot of places you could take it. Interesting stuff with Tom Holland, Spider-Man, with a sort of evil Tony Stark and everything. There could be some really interesting stuff you do there. But again, it just feels like, you had cop movies for 30 years before superhero movies, from Dirty Harry up to Bad Boys. It was cop movies. For 30 years before that, it was Westerns. For 30 years before that, it was gangsters. And we're just at the tail end of something, aren't we? We've got Superman, probably another Batman movie. The next X-Men relaunch will not be as good as the Bryan Singer, Matthew Vaughn one. It's just, there was lightning in a bottle. I think back then it was fresh, it was really new. They had a whole bunch of directors who were actually into this stuff from their childhood, people who grew up in the 80s, whereas I don't think that's the case anymore. And they invested in the really expensive directors too. Like, they got really brilliant guys in, like Christopher Nolan and so on. For about 12, 13 years, you had A-list directors doing this stuff, and it's really hard. And that's why moving it to television has been a real problem, because TV directors tend not to be the auteurs that cinema's directors are. This is really difficult to make this stuff work.
I think ultimately it went from being the auteur experimental style of direction where, you know, like there's something very charming about that period in the 2000s. We certainly didn't feel about it then as we do now, but we look back nostalgically on it. But there was a lot of experimentation of how do we make this work, because they hadn't found that formula. Marvel and then ultimately Disney Marvel did. And then it went from being, how do we make superhero movies work? We're going to try loads of different interesting things, to we've got the formula nailed. And now we're just going to put it into an assembly line, put it through the process, and you're going to crank out fairly generic, predictable movies that are standardized, but they work and they generate an absolute ton of money. I think that's the difference. And that's what you ended up with for the next 10 years. It was entirely dominated by this assembly line of Marvel movies. They knew what worked and they just kept doing it. Like, and from a business point of view, why wouldn't you? Of course you're going to keep doing it. You know?
I think it's more complex than that. Like the other 30 years for each thing, they were doing they were making the same thing, and then eventually it runs out and you go to the next thing. What we've witnessed recently is an entire change in like the morality and the reason why the movies were being made in the first place. It was, if you look at Strange New Worlds and the Star Trek thing, they just attacked Spock. We said, well, why Spock specifically? Well, he's stoic, like he's masculine. It's logical. That's what they're attacking. They want to go more into like feelings and emotions. They want to make everything more feminine, kind of thing. And you've witnessed like who the movies are being made for entirely changed. I don't think the basic idea, and I think you saw this with Wolverine. It was a very like classic or traditional kind of thing. It was just guys doing guy things, beating people up and going through. It was a very basic masculine story of just improving, then saving the world, sacrificing yourself and getting the girl, compared to what most Marvel is now, where rather than, like, you can't have the attractive woman in the character that the main guy falls for and eventually gets at the end. That's actually banned. They banned everything that traditional movies had to move into a new kind of era. And I think that's what's killed this. They keep trying to change what the audience should want rather than what they actually do. And I think if they just return to the classic stuff, they will get back to at least the old audience.
Where I slightly disagree with that, though, is I think that the people who aren't the auteurs have nothing to say. So what they say is this.
Probably.
Yeah. They're saying this generic nonsense, you know, that
yes.
You know, all these movies all agree with each other. They all feel that they're made by the same person. So I actually think that it's a side effect of bad directors. You know, like once you have good directors, you won't have the activist thing going on, I think, because they don't need to do that. You know?
I think I agree with you, like, on the point. It's just like the wording we use. Like they moved across to activists, but they moved across to activists because they wanted to push the message. And so people often classify good as just what they like. And so good directors would be what you agree with. And they kind of switched to there is no good. There is simply what we should do. And I think that's the issue. People often think of like morality as there is one correct thing. It's like, no, people can have an opposite morality. And they also think that's good. It is a disagreement between the two. And they try to shift across the alternative view. And I think we're agreeing with you, but we're agreeing with each other, but using different words. I would also want to get back to those same people.
I wonder as well if the activist perspective on this, like the idea that they're going to bring in more of these people who are more politically oriented and they've got a message that they want to push, and that's not their first priority is not like telling a great story. It's like getting a political point across, and then story comes second. That is a thing that you can only do in times of plenty. You know, when you have got a massively successful franchise behind you that is essentially going to generate money no matter what, which was what Marvel was in probably from 2014 up until about 2019. Essentially, you could put out almost any movie and it was guaranteed to make a ton of money because the enthusiasm was super high. The activism thing gradually erodes that. in addition to just like a general decline in storytelling and perhaps a decline in interest in the genre. Now they're at the point where they can't do that anymore because they're not guaranteed to make money from their movies, and activism is the luxury that they cannot afford anymore. And Chris, I think this ties into what you were saying, where weirdly, and I've not heard enough about this to report on it, but like it seems like they've recognized, hey, we can't afford to do this crap anymore. People aren't buying it. We're losing money. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on these fucking movies, and people aren't going to see them, and we're turning them away. We need to stop this stupidity and just get back to making good films again. Yeah, I think they seem to be quietly acting on it, which is remarkable, actually. Like they're correcting themselves.
It takes so long to make a movie. It's like turning a battleship around quickly. You can't do it. That's why we're going to get a year's worth of nonsense. Thunderbolts is I mean, Gary and I saw the footage. We're watching it saying, why did they make this? Did they need to fill a quota? Like, it's bad. And clearly Marvel cannot do TV. TV has mostly been, Marvel on TV has mostly been dismissible. Maybe one of the highlights was the first half of the season of WandaVision, which luckily that director, Matt Shakman, is doing Fantastic Four. We got a glimpse of that. It looks like, as a longtime fan, I'm enthusiastic, with the exception of Pedro Pascal's casting. I think he's miscast. I think he is miscast as Reed Richards, but we'll see. But I think that post Secret Wars, you're going to see a soft reboot of Marvel. After they do Secret Wars, it'll have every cameo you can possibly imagine. Everyone, it's an all hands on deck movie. After that, I think you'll see a soft reboot, and maybe they'll recast Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, and just start anew. Maybe, Avengers in the 1960s or something. So we shall see. But like, I just don't think they can continue on one timeline. They just can't do it. They don't do it in the comics. How many reboots have they had? Mark, probably better than I. A lot of reboots, right?
Do you know what I think is going to be a real weakness for them though with a reboot? Because I agree, I think it's inevitable. The actors are aging out. They're all in their 40s now and some in their 50s. But what's going to be a real problem is this idea of a cinematic universe. I've always said this. Like, what took the Marvel movies from making 400 million to 800 million to in the billions was the strength of that cinematic universe. Guys who were into one thing get into something else, and then this enormous amalgamation of fans who came to see the collective movies. But that's also your downfall too, because as soon as that edifice starts to crack, it all comes tumbling down. And it's really hard to just have a solo Iron Man movie come out of that, or a good solo Captain America movie. And it's funny because I think the cinematic universe is something, just from behind the scenes in a studio, that everybody was chasing for a decade, right? Like everybody kept talking about the monster universe from Universal and so on. Pals of mine were all planning their universes and everything. But I actually think it's really unique to Marvel, and actually just unique to Marvel 2008 to 2019 in terms of it working. This has never happened before, and I don't really think it's going to happen again. I think the universe thing is kind of over, and people just want good movies. I went to see Wolverine, Deadpool tonight, and I walked out before the end credits. I loved it. I loved the movie. It was great. But I didn't want to see the end credits. Like, I just wanted to see a film. And I really missed that. I don't want to see something that's a tapestry with 20 Disney Plus shows I don't care about. You got to get back to those singular movies again. So if I were them, I would just strip it right back and actually not tie these things together anymore.
I think that we as humans have a limited capacity for what we can absorb in terms of like TV shows, movies, like how many different things tied together to make this overarching story. And I think the early phases of Marvel were smart about that because, one, you didn't have the fucking stupid Disney Plus shows. You just had 2, maybe at most 3 movies a year. They all tied into this overarching narrative, and that was fine. It was enough that you could keep abreast of what was going on, and it wasn't too much. Now we're at the point where there's TV shows everywhere. Like, not this year, obviously, because we're on the back of like the strikes and everything got slowed down. But before this, there was like multiple TV shows, multiple movies per year, and you had to watch all of it if you actually wanted to keep up to date with all of this stuff, like what was going on in the MCU. It was just too much. It was far too much for people to keep up to date with, and it became like homework. It became like a chore to get through rather than entertainment.
I don't buy this.
Enjoy.
The fact is, these universes would be absolutely fine if they were made of good films. People go to see good films, and so at that point, it's almost automatic. But
if you tell people they have to also watch this, like four different TV shows.
You don't. They can not only build them so that you don't, but you didn't have to. The Disney Plus shows oftentimes only contradicted the films. They never actually helped.
Well, they could have built it like that way, but they didn't. They built it in such a way, like if you were going to watch Multiverse of Madness, you had to have watched WandaVision.
No, you didn't. Though that's my point.
Did.
No, you didn't.
Can I just say,
how is Wanda suddenly become a villain?
No, what I'm trying to explain is the film was absolutely nonsensical with or without WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
There's no homework that's going to help you understand MOM. MOM was a fucking writing disaster.
It was, yeah.
Well,
but like you were still expected to have watched the TV show in order to understand the movie. Like even say the movie had been very well written.
The worst example because MOM was hyper successful.
The movie was worse if you understood what happened, because he's like, well, we don't care about that. It's like, no, she was an evil villain during the entire series. She literally got a load of people, and they were horrifically treated during the entire thing. It's like, I know you'd be a hero afterwards. So the more you understand about the history of MOM, the worse it gets. It seemed like a movie that was forcefully tied into a series they didn't want to be tied into more than anything else.
But here's the thing, you give the audience an excuse to check out the minute they're allowed to miss something. So, for example, my children went to see every Marvel movie, and they didn't go and see Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, because they hadn't watched WandaVision. None of us watched it. And we didn't go and see the Marvels because we'd never watched the TV show, the Ms. Marvel TV show or anything. So you feel once pieces of the jigsaw are missing, there's some subconscious thing in an audience where they think, this isn't now essential.
MOM, like I said, is one of the ones they're hanging on to franchise-wise, Doctor Strange, because it did really well. It was right behind No Way Home as like the only successes they can even call name to, which No Way Home doesn't count because it was Sony. The point I was going to make as well is that the other cinematic universes to compare, DC did have a long run, and some of them were pretty successful. Aquaman's obviously the hilarious, like, anomaly almost. The Dark Universe, or whatever the hell it was called, I don't even really think we should count it because they only had awful films as starters and then failed. If they'd had a great The Mummy and then a great Dracula or whatever, and a great, they might actually have started a universe as a result of good films being supported and watched anyway. The thing with the MCU was Iron Man was a great fucking film. Everyone loved it. And then The Incredible Hulk, Thor, Captain America, yeah. Iron Man 2, but Avengers, it was enough. It wasn't even that Phase 1 was made up of a series of incredible films. It was just they had enough to carry it through to Avengers, which I think was a great installment and came through on the promise of exactly what it was. And then it was like, as long as they have the tentpole movies that are successful and good enough, it can carry through a universe, as we saw. But then everything was falling apart after. It's just so funny to think about, because when WandaVision came out, we were asked on our show like how long it would take for the MCU to get to a point where it could release something that would flop. We were like, you'd have to have like 10 to 20 bad installments in a row.
We've got it. Yeah.
And that's what they did. And they absolutely fucking staked it right in the heart. And now it's probably dead. Because I do agree with you somewhat in that I'm not sure it can ever recover. I'm not sure they could ever get back to where they were now.
The trust is possibly gone with the audience, isn't it? I think the trust.
Yep. I think you can definitely get that back, though. But I definitely agree with you that you only have to be good enough, because people will forgive something as long as you have the benefit of the doubt. You can only look at like Doctor Who or Bonds. There were some iffy things in the middle on all those runs. But people would always see the next one because it might be good this time. And if you kill something long enough, then it's when they've absolutely given up on you is the worst. But I do think Marvel made the right decision with things like the Marvels. You didn't need to see the TV shows. But it is interesting that you raise up that people might think that you had to, because that's also what the articles are running with, all the journalists are running with. And although you didn't need to know to see it, to actually watch the movie, if people think you do, that's basically the same effect.
Yes. And imagine Bonds had tied in with Doctor Who and Star Wars and everything else, and they all sucked at the same time as well. People are lost, So I think
Star Trek might be tying in with Doctor Who.
But
I'm not joking.
Doctor Who, you can maybe get their trust back if you do a great season in 5 years' time or something, you know. But when a whole universe is kind of fallen. Although in saying that, I mean, this might lead us into Deadpool and Wolverine a little too early, but that's back, like everybody showed up, so there must still be some love there that can be rekindled.
I think so, but like I don't think that love is unique to the MCU. I don't think people were going as Marvel fans to go see Deadpool and Wolverine. I think that was more they were fans of the Deadpool franchise, and to some extent they're fans of the Fox X-Men franchise. That's really why they were going to see that movie, because it's like a kind of cap to all of that. It's a farewell, and I suppose it was another point I actually wanted to make. The idea of like a shared universe, it was really pioneered by the X-Men movies of the 2000s, because it wasn't as developed as the MCU, and it was certainly not as slick and efficient as that ultimately became. But it kind of blazed the trail. It proved that it could be done. You had the mainline X-Men movies, and then you had like the aborted attempts to do like origin stories. Then you had like the X-Men First Class, where they go back in time. Like there was all this shared storyline told through different perspectives, different characters over different decades and eras, all tying into a central narrative. They never quite got it working in the same way that Marvel did, but they were the prototype for what the MCU would eventually become.
Do you know what was interesting though? I remember at the time the Fox movies were seen as the inferior Marvel films. In hindsight, they were pretty damn good, weren't they? There was there was a few stinkers in there, but there was some absolute beauties as well, like X-Men First Class, Logan, all this stuff. There's some of the really great ones were the Fox.
X-Men 2 is pretty kino.
Amazing. Yeah. I think they had the passion. They didn't necessarily have the formula locked in. And it's just an interesting time, because it felt like that period where there was a lot of, there was a lot of different attempts to find the correct way to make a superhero movie, and they hadn't quite locked it in yet. And so I always find the X-Men movies fascinating from that point of view, because they're like a diamond in the rough. They hadn't quite got it nailed. And by the time they did, the franchise was kind of dying out. A lot of the actors were aging out. You finished up with movies like Logan, where it's like they after 20 years they finally found the right fucking way to do a Wolverine movie, and it's like when Hugh Jackman's like 50 years old and just ready to retire. It's like, God damn it, why couldn't we have had that style of Wolverine movie when they did X-Men Origins? Like that would have been amazing if it had been R-rated, violent, gritty, brutal. That's what people wanted from a Wolverine film.
But there was that period where they hadn't quite figured out how to do superhero movies. I think specifically in the 90s, there seemed to be quite a lot of them coming out, and they were all terrible. Like Shaq as Steel and Batman and Robin, yeah. And what's weird though is I was watching saw Deadpool tonight, and I saw the trailer for Venom 3, and it feels like one of those films, doesn't it? It feels like one of those films from 1995 where they haven't cracked the code yet. And it's the same. It was the same with Morbius and all these things as well, doesn't it? They feel that they're made by guys who are not into superheroes.
Yeah, well, with the Venom movies, I don't understand why they keep getting made. I don't know who sees them or why. Like, I've seen both of them, and I can't tell you a single thing about either of them. I know Tom Hardy and Woody Harrelson are in them. That's all I got for you. I can't remember anything that happens. They're so forgettable. Right? I don't know if they made a lot of money. They obviously made enough that it was justifiable to do like the next one. But they just feel like this weird aborted attempt to have their own little cinematic universe, because I think they had the rights to Spider-Man, and they were still hoping that they could like bring him in to fight Venom. It ain't gonna happen. Like, forget it. But it's funny that they thought they could do it. Like that's there's the two titans of multiverses. Like you had DC, which never quite got off the ground. You had Marvel, that was like incredible success for years and then like crashed and burned. And then you had Sony with their Venomverse, like this like fucking random subsidiary in between, like trying to make something happen.
Tom Hardy versus Tom Holland though would be terrifying, wouldn't it? I mean, he would leather that wee guy.
Oh yeah, like
he would leather him.
Well, that would be a great. Can we get Madam Web in there as well? Like I think she deserves it.
I think it was yeah.
She earned her space.
Without Madam Web, we wouldn't really be aware of Sydney Sweeney, and I think we should all just take a moment to appreciate that.
100%.
That's enough reason for it. Make an R-rated sequel. Do it. Do it.
Yeah, do it. Come on, do it. I was curious to hear you guys' thoughts on the lineup of MCU projects that we've got coming up, because we did touch on this briefly, and it's just there's not a whole lot to get excited about here. We have Deadpool Born Again, which is going to come apparently in March of next year, which
Deadpool.
Oh, sorry,
Daredevil.
Yeah, clearly I've had a bit too much of this, but anyway.
It's all good.
Not enough.
Yeah, sorry, Daredevil Born Again. Yeah, which if we're seeing how he's been treated in She-Hulk, it just makes me feel sad for Charlie Cox. Like they're not going to do this right. And seeing him as well make his little appearance in Echo, I just thought, what is this guy being used for? It's like the most credible character in sort of Marvel TV is now just being used as like a launching platform for all these other terrible TV shows.
Dude, I could totally see a board meeting where he's negotiating getting the TV show, and they push forward a little contract thing. He's like, what is that? And it's like, an appearance in Echo. You have to do that. And he's like, well, is it that? Like, what is the story? They're like, just agree and you can have your show. It's like, fine. Yeah. She-Hulk as well. Fuck.
But he did interviews talking about how much he enjoyed acting in She-Hulk. That he'd written it off in his head as like a set.
Lies.
Look, I think it's about time that if actors stops just repeating whatever they're told if they are lying about it, because it is actively harming your career. It is harming what the audience thinks of you.
Think about it, Disparu. They're at the board meeting again, and he's like, I'll do it, but I'm allowed to say whatever I want about these. Then they push forward another contract. They're like, no.
Here's your non-disparagement clause. Just please sign this, and then we can move forward.
Is it worth it to get the next series if that series kills your career?
Well, he and Vincent D'Onofrio and others have been trying so hard to get the story told that they think deserves to be told, and I'm with them on that. But when you find out Disney, sorry, not Destiny, Disney the only ones that can tell that story.
I think I maybe trust Destiny to do this rather than Disney.
When I was at Marvel, I heard the most interesting thing when they were first putting the Daredevil show together, and it was such a clever idea. They said the big stuff we'll do in the cinemas, and the street level guys will have on television, and we can do the kind of stories we can't do in cinema. And that's exactly what Daredevil season 1 was, wasn't it? It was just a I mean,
it had enough
products. It was amazing.
It had enough of a link to the movies. Like it made vague references to like the events of the Avengers and stuff. Like okay, fine, we understand it's in the same universe, but it's very much told its own story. And it was great. It was a classic example of we didn't realize how good we had it back then until it was gone, and then it got replaced with the Disney Plus version. And my God, it's awful. Yeah, like they'll never do what they did on that Netflix series with Disney.
No, and they'll never do Punisher or any of these things. I mean, those Netflix shows could have been absolutely brilliant if they'd get into seasons 4, 5, 6. Plus, I also feel we've just had Daredevil Born Again with season 3 of the show. I don't know what this new one's even going to be. That story's been told.
Yeah. I mean, it's they had the perfect casting in all of that, really. Like, you had Vincent D'Onofrio, amazing Kingpin. You had Charlie Cox, great Daredevil, and we had a brilliant Punisher as well. Iron Fist, no one really cared about that. But
is he getting his own thing as well, Punisher?
No.
Is he on a TV show or something? Or
no, I don't think so. He's up for doing it, but I don't think they've signed him up for anything specific. I think he was very much like, I'd be willing to do it if the script was right, but he seems like he's got a bit of integrity. He's not going to just
he's a proper
cash out. Yeah.
Disney's The Punisher as a logo I want to see, though. That does sound hilarious. I like
it.
One of the things... and I'm not sure how controversial this is, but one of the TV series that tied really well into movie series was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when they revealed Hydra. I still think, I'd happy to argue, that their Hydra reveal in the series was better than it was in the movies. Because in the movies, they walk into a bunker and it's like, oh, by the way, Hydra exists. But in the show, In the show, they
no, I agree with you. That
and then they
bunker scene
had
was
all
great.
the characters that you actually cared about were suddenly villains, and it was like what on it? It was a far better reveal, and it actually affected characters that you'd grown to like. Rather than in the movie, it was kind of just hand waves. It's oh yeah, Hydra exists, now we're fighting them. And so I definitely think you can use TV series in that aspect to kind of add more emotional depth to the movies, because the movie, it's really short, it doesn't really have the time, but over a series you can make people really grow to like a character.
I think you're right, and I was going to mention along with all of this, does nobody get a sense of spooky, creepy, skinwalkery sort of stuff going on? That you have Deadpool and Wolverine openly admits we fucked up with the multiverses. They even say, like L after L or whatever the fuck the line was about doing bad, which I thought was really interesting because Multiverse of Madness is often considered by a lot of people broadly and by Marvel to be a success, not just financially but critically too. Obviously, by us, it's considered to be crap. So it's interesting to watch Deadpool say something like that, right? But then where I'm going with this, of course, is that movie banks hard on the multiverse. Deadpool, like the scene after he says that is one of the most multiverse gratuitous scenes ever. And then immediately after that, we get an announcement that's the most multiverse thing ever. We got Tony Stark coming back, but he's Doctor Doom because he's a variant. And then in the future, we're going to have all kinds of cameos and everything. And then we've also got Daredevil, one of the most beloved Marvel characters, is still running, coming back. And a lot of it to me feels like, especially with Kang having been ousted, that it was, yes, a course correction of sorts, but what's the difference between that and them being like, okay, we've got to manipulate these people back in, even if we're not making things that are any good anymore.
Recognizing the problem doesn't always mean you've got the solution, though, as well. So I do suspect. I thought this was going to end with Wolverine and Deadpool, but Fantastic Four is obviously set in a parallel reality because it seems to be a world where the 1960s, created this perfect vision of an American Jetson style future. So that's a parallel Earth those guys are coming from, which I'm guessing is probably going to get destroyed by Galactus, and they'll come here. So there's a lot of convoluted multiverse stuff in there, and I hang out with a lot of normies, right? I mean, I live in another country. I'm away from Hollywood most of the time and everything. So most of my friends are like regular people who go to the cinema. They're not writers, they're not comic book fans or whatever. And they're baffled by the multiverse, no idea. So that foothold is gone. If they continue to do this, it's going to be an endless problem for them.
I think the problem with Multiverse of Madness is you're not judging the movie, you need to judge what comes after it. Like, I watched Multiverse of Madness because I like Doctor Strange. He was my favorite character. And I hated the movie. But I went to see it for him. Then the effects of that impact what I think about the next movie. And so you probably shouldn't learn the lessons from that movie. You want to see the impact it has on the future of a series.
I mean, No Way Home, right? That was a huge success, not necessarily for Marvel, but it was still hyper multiverse. So the selection of multiverse stuff to me feels like Marvel have only just started revving the engine while simultaneously being like, oh yeah, that's shitty multiverse, huh guys? Yeah. Anyway, get the multiverse stuff. Go.
I think the potential of the multiverse from a business point of view, and I'm talking purely from a business point of view, is it allows you to bring back all these characters for like fun cameos without having to really put too much storytelling work into it. It's like, oh, we want to have Wesley Snipes as Blade come back into our franchise for 15 minutes or whatever. Sure, we could do that because the multiverse allows us to do that. And we don't really need to explain it beyond that, but it's just fucking cool to see him back doing stuff. That's it. That's all you need. And so that's the potential for it there is just from a business point of view, smash a bunch of toys that have never been interacting with each other before. Like you can smash them together and watch the sparks fly. Great stuff. The problem is when you don't really make use of that, like in Multiverse of Madness, there's none of that. There's no legacy characters really that we could get excited about seeing or cameos or whatever that were going to crowd please people. It was just a really shit story strung together by a crappy premise.
Well, I mean, Professor X, you would be able to obviously, I would argue
that's all we got though.
Cameos, but I mean, I can make an argument for a lot of them, right? Like what's his name, the guy who got his head blown off. He was from a TV show. I didn't watch it, so I can't say.
Yeah, Boltagar fucking Sonic Head or something. I don't know.
The best Professor X cameo is when he was on skis and he was going around the rails in that thing. Someone made a meme of it that was better than the movie.
Yes, that meme is fantastic. Obviously, I've got 6 hours of video talking about how much I despise Multiverse of Madness. I'm just saying that one could argue that the same thing is being used there. Certainly Professor X in the fucking trailers, right? Be like, oh, you got to come see it for him. And then we watch him die. It's like, thank you, I guess. Black Bolt, that was it.
Though, I mean, seeing Wesley Snipes back as Blade just felt like the perfect closure to these amazing 25 years, though, doesn't it? You know, like, he was the guy. People kind of forget that Blade was the first Marvel movie, really. You know, it started a year before X-Men and 3 years before Spider-Man. But I mean, I've always been a Blade fan, so I was loving it. And having Wesley Snipes back tonight, I was. He had about 3 lines, but everyone stole the movie.
He's still got it as well. He's like 65 years old, but like he still looks awesome. He can still move pretty well. Like I would legit at this point just happily see another Wesley Snipes Blade movie, like an older Blade, you know, that's more grizzled and experienced and stuff. He's got to like pass it on to a younger generation, something like that. Fine, make it work, man. There was even a great line where he's like he's about to like fire a bazooka or something. He's like, I'm the only Blade. And like Ryan Reynolds just straight up looks at the screen and just goes, "Yeah." I like that.
The thing about if they did announce something like that or announce whatever the hell we're looking for, so to speak, I still wouldn't be convinced they are giving the fans what they want until you see what they actually do with some of these things. Like having a Blade movie with Wesley Snipes being the more, maybe he's like a veteran fighter and he's going to tutor the next Blade, or it is just old man Blade, that sort of thing you could do. I still worry incredibly about the way they make these movies, what talent they bring on to write. What we know they've been struggling with the literal Blade movie for how long now? Because they cannot figure out what the fuck they're doing. Which you know, bringing in the Russos, you'd be like, well, that's an assurance of artists, right? It's like, well, and I don't know if it's controversial on this panel or not. I thought Endgame was like their weakest installment of all time, not only in the MCU but all of their work. And you'd be like, oh well, maybe that was because it was multiverse. Like the next 2 they're doing are only multiverse. Like that's all we're getting.
Endgame had a great 45 minutes. You know that big battle scene, you know, where you think all hope is lost and the Avengers show up and Avengers assemble. You kind of can't remember the rest of the movie, but that was enough to pull you through it, though. I think, wasn't it? It's a bit watch the Joss Whedon Avengers movie again, and it's like tedious as hell for about 90 minutes. But that final 45 minutes is so great. You come out pumped up. You love it.
Everyone cheered when Cap picked up the hammer and stuff. Like, it's just like, you know, a lot of fan service there. Yeah. Honestly, I think when we're talking about the Blade question, I would happily see like a Deadpool verse where you've got like R-rated superheroes, like the dark version of the MCU, where it's very violent, very gritty, and you've got guys like Blade and Deadpool and stuff just like having an absolute ball. You can, you know, cut down the budget so they're like 50, 60 million a piece. Easily affordable, and you would have the time of your life like watching movies like that. But I know they won't do it. They'll try and fold it all into this generic family-friendly MCU, like everyone can go see it, and I'm not buying it.
Well, this is why you need to niche down your movies, right? Because I was willing to give Deadpool and Wolverine a pass on a lot of things because it was a parody movie. So I don't really expect like some big complex plot for it. I just want to have fun. I want there to be jokes. And you can shove as many weird cameos in as you want because it's a joke movie. But when you want me to take something serious, well, now everything has to matter. Now deaths have to matter. Now you can't have the multiverse because bringing back Robert Downey Jr. as an entirely different person completely undermines the character that he played. And so I think by making everything generic, they undermined basically the core of everything. So now nobody cares about anything. And so the only thing you end up with is people care about the least important things. And I think if Marvel had to choose, they would probably have preferred Deadpool and Wolverine to fail and all their other movies succeed, because that is the joke movie. That was kind of thing they probably didn't care about that much. Hence why they went, you can basically do anything except talk about these things.
Real quick, I saw MauLer. I saw you on Real BBC. I know you hated Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm in the as camp. I had fun. That story, though, no one can deny is terrible. Yeah. With the TVA, it's just god awful, and they have to somehow find a way to make the audience understand the stakes of a multiverse. They portray it terribly. with a branching line. It's like making drama out of the battery percentage on your phone. It's meaningless.
This is the Loki effect, isn't it? Like this is exactly what they did there.
Show other universes. Show planets collapsing on themselves. Show another version of the Avengers dying. Like, make us feel something about the multiverse, because a branching line, a status bar, is terrible. And I hate the TV version of the TVA. It's a stupid concept. It's gobbledygook. It's just an excuse for moments with Deadpool and Wolverine, which actually are great moments. I like those character moments. I think that's what Marvel does well. But in terms of a villain of the movie, whatever the movie is, we know that villain will get defeated, right? At the end of the movie, right? That's just going to happen. And there's no repercussions after. And the story is just like even Deadpool says, like, exposition, like he points out all the cliches. So they have to find a way and then get past it. Get past the multiverse stuff. Just what's next? It didn't work. It failed.
You don't think what's next is nothing logically, though? Like, think about this. These characters all appeared as singular characters 25 years ago, between Blade, Spider-Man, all this kind of thing. And then you started getting loose team-ups, mentions of characters in other people's movies. Then that all culminated in the Avengers. Then you had to top that. Then you had to top that with the multiverse, So there's nowhere you can go beyond space and other realities. That's as big as it gets. So I think they have to go right back down again. It's like Drinker was saying. I think go back to singular characters again. They don't see each other for 5 years. This is what we did whenever I started at Marvel 20 odd years ago now. All the characters were in each other's books all the time, and nobody knew where to pick up a new book. Around about 1999, and Joe Quesada, who was editor-in-chief, he said nobody's allowed to guest star in anybody's book for 3 years and no crossovers for 5 years. And it actually meant it was an event again when they all met each other and the creatives could focus on the singular characters. Plus, it's also a hell of a lot cheaper. You could make a Marvel movie for $80 million, $90 million if you did that. I would strip it back down to the singular characters again and then make it feel special when they all get together again. But that should be years down the line, I think.
The interesting thing about what Chris said is they actually did that in the What If series, which nobody watched. Before Multiverse of Madness, they had Doctor Strange taking over, getting all this power and basically destroying the multiverse. And they showed you all of the characters that they'd shown in the previous episodes, their universe all being destroyed. They were fighting to the last thing, and then they were pulled out of their universe just as it was about to be destroyed. And although nobody cared about What If, so it didn't have the effect that you're on about, it does prove that they know how to do this properly. They just choose not to, because it's easier to show a line being deleted.
I think the great pull of the What If series, and it is, like you say, it is a shame that not more people watched it. It does pose some interesting questions, like what if Peggy Carter had been the one who got the super soldier serum instead of Steve Rogers, and it does actually tell an interesting story of how that might play out differently. What if Ultron actually succeeded in his mission to take over Earth? Like, I'm pretty sure he ultimately becomes like the controlling force of the entire universe. He even destroys the narrator who's like watching all of this. Like, he's the introduction to like the What If universe. He even takes him out. That's kind of interesting stuff. I quite like that. It's cool, but like the movies never make good on that promise, because they are scared to go that far. They always play it way too safe. And
imagine the What If cartoon had been out when you were 10. You'd have lost your mind. You'd be like, this is the best cartoon I've ever seen in my life. But the trouble was, it was on at the same time as 200 other superhero shows. So it kind of got lost in the middle of it. Also, I think I trust the market. I trust the audience. Things are going to be reduced, and that can only be a good thing. Like, if a guy like me, I went to see Superman 4 times, right? I'm the sort of guy that shows up. I'm there on day one, and I don't even watch this stuff now. There was just too much of it. There's a glut. So I think things will be appreciated again when it's stripped back a little bit, I think.
Speaking of appreciating things, by the way, I was going through the lineup of Marvel projects that we've got coming up. The next thing that we've got chronologically is going to be Agatha All Along. Are you guys excited for that?
No.
Well, yes, but not for the reasons.
What will that?
I
Because
hear
I'm
you.
going to guess conservatively that probably cost at least 100 million, probably 150. Like, going by the basic price tag on all of these Disney Plus shows, it's at least $100 million. No one is going to watch this, and no one's going to care about it remotely. A character spinning off from a spin-off of a movie. So essentially, you got, Infinity War, then you got WandaVision, and then you've got this. Why? Who thought this was a good idea?
There was some meeting that happened like 5 years ago, maybe more, where for 1 hour they said, we will literally okay any project that anyone has. And 5 dudes walked in one at a time, being like, She-Hulk. They're like, done, go do it. Ironheart, done, go do it. Agatha, done, go do it. It's like, what are you? And then someone burst through going, stop.
It's funny because comics sometimes kind of predates everything that's going to happen in film. It's really weird. There's a 20, 30-year lag. So you've got Dark Knight and Watchmen are big comics, and then 20 years later, they're big movies and so on. And the Marvel explosion, with Spider-Man and X-Men, sort of was 20, 30 years after the comic books were huge. Similarly, the implosion of Marvel in the early 90s is very similar to what happened in Marvel movies. It's really interesting because what happened was you had a bunch of really big name creatives like Frank Miller and Todd McFarlane and all these guys doing stuff everybody loved. And then they went away and they were like, this is fine. We can actually pump out even more books than we were doing because the brand is what's important here. And they genuinely were getting people's roommates and pals to come in and write the books. They had zero respect for the audience. And like anybody was doing this stuff. And that's kind of what happened. And the market collapsed, it utterly collapsed. And it took about 6 years to come back again. And something almost identical has happened in the live action side as well, I think, where they were bringing in anybody, green lighting any project.
Yeah. And I think, we all understand the lag that happens with TV and film projects, like from idea to eventual release. It's like, 3-4 years easily. And this absolutely feels like something that was produced during that period of plenty, that glut of Marvel content, where it's just like, we'll just make more stuff. More stuff that just spins off from the thing that already spinned off from the thing, because, why not? Everyone's buying everything Marvel related. And, Agatha Harkness, why? Echo, like a fucking, again, it's a spin-off from like a henchman from...
What an insane idea. And they actually... And we know as well as they did, they do that when they were leasing it. They were like, "What the fuck was this? Jeez, just dump it out and hope nobody notices."
No one was clamoring for it. It's basically a show based on a meme. It was Agatha all along. So you take a meme and make it a TV show. It's very lame.
But it's a huge money sink again. Like for the price of this TV show, you could probably have made another film of some sort and made a ton more money if it was good.
But it's like in the 90s comics, it's exactly the same, where they thought anything did sell for quite a while. So you can sort of get it, like you typically with Marvel, you invest 200 million, you make back 700-800 million. That was the world they were living in for such a long time that they thought, like the comic guys, this will go on forever.
But it's why, because I used to just be like, okay, this stuff has failed. Just bring back the stuff that made your successful stuff. Give them whatever they want. Just literally pay them anything they ask for to get them back, because you need them back, because they're the only things that can be successful. And now I've kind of merged from that into, you need to bring the people back who haven't changed. The ones that didn't go along with your new path. The ones who actually have a spine and stood up to you. Because I've seen what happened with Doctor Who when they brought Russell T Davies and David Tennant back. They'd changed with the times. And so they just brought the new ideas and destroyed, even though they were from the past when it was successful, they've now destroyed the modern stuff as well. And so this is why I don't respect the people that's like, oh, well, you need to apologize for this. It's like, well, that means they can't bring back what they used to, because they're now new people. They've gone along with the new stuff. So they're out. You need to return to the classic people who are still the same people they used to be, that have the same morality and ideas they used to be. And those are your core that are kind of static and fixed and didn't move.
Is there an example in history, though, of anyone ever coming back and it being as good as it was the first time? In any genre, in anything? I can't think of one. Generally coming back is never a good sign.
It's I think people reach a creative and artistic peak, and that peak is often like a lot earlier than they would like. And yeah, generally, if they're away for a long period of time and then come back, it's not going to be as good.
I mean, to a particular project, though, you know, if you've done 2 Bad Boys films and then you come back and do Bad Boys 3, you know what I mean? And I don't like any of the Bad Boys film. That's a bad example. But like, you know what I mean? It's like when you've been away for a while, Men in Black's another one, you know? Like
Rocky Balboa, like, because you know he's away for about like 15 years, and he came back, and that was a pretty good movie comparatively.
It never reaches the cultural heights, that impact of 1976 and Rocky.
No,
you know, when everybody went to see it, you know. So I think it's never a good sign to come back. I mean, my friends of mine always say, "Do you think I should go back and do this thing?" And I was like, "Don't do it," you know. Like it never works.
Yeah.
Is that because Hollywood's changed, so they filter out the people that would have remained in the past, so to speak? Like they're not progressive enough, so they never get asked in the first place?
Oh, no,
is it more like survivorship bias?
I mean, you'll get Harrison Ford back at 80 playing Indiana Jones. You know, I mean, people.
Yeah, I mean more the creators than the act. Like Robert Downey Jr. and stuff. I think he'll just be able to act as well as he could have done at any kind of thing. But I think writing is a bit more specific.
Certainly, there's in the background, especially if you're a writer, nobody sees how old you are. You know, so like you can have quite a long career. I mean, the guy who wrote Spider-Man 2, Alvin, what's his face? You know, he was like 78 or something when he wrote that script. You know,
I think more with writers, especially in the modern era, it's that your values have changed, and so you may have been like very pro-masculine kind of thing before, but now you're very progressive, which is an entirely opposite moral system, and so you can't write the same stuff that you could have done.
This is something I always tell people, like, see, being in those meetings and everything, there's never a guy who says, make this progressive. You know, there's never a call from above to do this, you know? I mean, I know it seems like that, but it doesn't. And what it tends to be is quite fear-based, you know, where it's like people think, hang on, this is the trend. I need to get in on this trend. So when I talk to pals, every time that's what's happened, you know, it's like there's no guy at Disney boss, you know, who's saying, destroy the franchises. Everybody's just trying to come up with something they hope is going to be the next big thing. And what has been going on for the last 5 years just hasn't worked. And my God, you would not believe how fast everyone's pivoting in the background. You know?
I mean, that's good to know. Like, so is it kind of like a self-censorship almost? Like, I know this is the prevailing trend, so I don't want to rock the boat, and I need to.
Well, there was a writer in pitching for one of our things, right? And I remember it was a couple of years back when the Joker came out. And he was saying, yeah, it was our thing was nothing like the Joker, right? And this guy was like, yeah, well, you know, it's like the Joker, you know, it's like, and he kept referring to the Joker because the Joker had this massive opening weekend the week before, you know, and it's like people just try and jump on whatever is currently fashionable and what they think will get them the gig. So they will come in and say what they think people want to hear. And quite often the executives are baffled by a lot of these decisions, but then they don't want to seem out of date. And they go along with things too. So I think it's so fear-based, a lot of it. And the minute the trend changes, everyone's like, what the hell was that all about? You know, like the number of people I know, I've got great friends who are really high up in Disney who are mocking the woke stuff and everything, you know. So like, even though they were the guys green lighting this stuff, you know. So everybody's just trying to keep their job and their seat on a company jet, you know.
Yeah.
Who is the person though? Because somebody must be in the like people have to get fired or something in order for this fear or whatever it is to go down. Like, whether it be like HR or someone makes the dominant kind of social order in any company or the
but that's been the case since 1920. You know, I mean, biblical epics or whatever. You know, something comes along and it becomes a trend, and then that trend makes money, and then everybody jumps on that, burns it out, and then somebody else finds a new trend. You know, so these things, they might last 3 years, they might last 10 years, they might, in the superhero case, be 25 years. But it's just a continual chasing of the next big thing, and people say what they want people to hear. You know,
and the interesting thing. Sorry, just quickly. The interesting thing about Hollywood is that their culture is entirely opposite what the audience wants. And so this is very contradictory.
Well, I think that'd be political rallies. I mean, whatever cause or whatever political party celebrities get behind, generally I've noticed the public go the other way, you know. So Hollywood and the public can be quite different, yeah.
I mean, is that like, because presumably it's not always been that way, and it's like it sets up this weird adversarial relationship between Hollywood, like the purveyors of entertainment, and the customers, where it's like we represent values that are diametrically opposed to what you want as customers, but we still want you to buy our stuff. And so it becomes this odd relationship where it becomes very adversarial. because then it gets to the point of, as we've seen with various TV shows or movies, oh, you didn't like our thing, well, I guess that means you're a racist then, or whatever. Like,
I think that's a very recent phenomenon, and I think it's already over. Like, you go back and you look at the DVD extras on Lord of the Rings and the X-Men and Spider-Man, and the actors and the creatives have fallen over themselves, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, to say, I'm trying to please the fans, I hope the fans love this, and da-da-da, The last 5 years, there's been this weird antagonism where they're stoking it with the fans, which is horrible. It doesn't work at all,
Yeah.
But I've noticed in the last 6 months, it's really interesting. Look at all the genre stuff from the last 6 months. Look at the
Rings of
promos.
Power. Yeah.
And they're back to begging the fans to love them again, which is the way it should be. The fans are your customers, But I think that was a 5-year anomaly, that being at odds with the fans. I think that's over already.
The interesting thing with Rings of Power is that they've clearly changed the marketing. Like, they dropped a lot of the identity stuff, but there were still several people who just couldn't resist. Like, the moment they got an opportunity, they had to shove it in. So I think one of the problems is they have hired people who, despite being told not to, they are true believers, and it kind of they're more hiding it than anything else.
The market will take care of it, and the same as Star Wars. Like, Star Wars is going to be washed away. Like this stuff is just all going to be washed away. Like, these people they're crossing lightsabers with the people who've loved it for 50 years. It's ridiculous, and they will die if you don't support the fan base of all people. Never mind the general audience, but the fan base. I mean, that's your front line, isn't it? That's your soldiers.
Well, the Acolyte. I mean, we saw the debacle that was the Acolyte. Not only from a content standpoint, but from the sort of divisions in the fandom, and Star Wars theory being attacked and all that. So I feel like that's company why, like, Lucasfilm does that. There are people in lower level positions, marketing, social media, whatnot, that feel somehow that is a way to get traction, maybe on social media posts, not for the show itself, which was non-existent in the ratings for streaming shows. So, but I mean, it's like every Star Wars thing that comes out, it's another Star Wars is dead. It's been dead for a long time. Someone should do a funeral. I think that's what they should happen with that property. But
it's funny,
I think they should, Chris. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think we should all attend it.
I saw this amazing thing. In 2005, I remember being in a toy shop, as creepy as that sounds, and I remember looking over and seeing the Pirates of the Caribbean toys, and just all these kids all going crazy and jumping over them and buying everything. And then I remember seeing the Superman Returns toys off to one side, and no, it was just dead. It was like a ghost town in that side of the store. And then recently, I saw the Star Wars stuff and the Marvel stuff, and it was back when Marvel was super hot, and nobody was at the Star Wars stuff. There was like one guy with a beard at the Star Wars stuff, and all the kids were going crazy for the Marvel stuff, I think it's just past. It's gone now. I think something we loved is now no more. I think.
Mark, were you at Comic-Con? Were you there last
week? No.
You weren't? Okay, yeah. I was there. Lucasfilm had a big booth, and all the Acolyte costumes were on display. And they had, other stuff too. There was Vader, Luke, whatever. Classic Star Wars still sells. Nothing sells of new Star Wars. I only saw one cosplay from Acolyte. It was someone did the Stranger, but that was it. I mean, you go to any con, you could throw a rock and hit a Harley Quinn or a Joker, or a Batman, whatever. Nothing from the Acolyte. Zero, except the one that Gary and I saw. It's like, oh wow, that's homemade Stranger costume. That'll be irrelevant in 6 months. But yeah, I really think it's that company. I think Marvel has learned through failure. I mean, if you're in a high position in Hollywood, you want to make decisions based on data, right? Data. This performed well. Let's do that. Fans responded well to this. This did not do well. And I think Marvel is learning, and Lucasfilm is stubbornly wants to continue down this road, doubling down on, I don't know, the people that don't know what they're doing. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this new series they have coming up. It's like the Goonies in the Star Wars universe. Like, it looks just god awful. There's a character that looks like Dumbo I know I'm not joking. Look it up. What's the name? Disparu, you know the name of the show.
Skeleton Crew.
Yes, you'll be breaking down every episode, I assume.
I don't
bad
think
enough,
so.
I definitely will.
My assumption is going to be that it's going to be mundane. Like, there's not going to be much to say about it. It'll probably be pretty straightforward, and nothing interesting will really happen. And that some children out there might find it entertaining enough to put on it before they go to sleep. You know, because the character you're talking about, I think it's supposed to be like a baby version of the same species Max Rebo is. So it's supposed to probably be some kind of baby Yoda type situation in terms of ground people. Jude Law is supposed to be a Jedi in it. I don't know if that's even if he'll pull out a lightsaber at any point. You know, even who knows what's going to happen. But
I've not seen Jude Law since AI.
I feel like
haven't you seen the Peter Pan movie?
I think it's going to be skipped over by almost everybody, but we'll see.
The horrible one that came out just like last year, where it was like he was Captain Hook.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the one that was only on streaming? Yeah, I did.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot you seen it.
Sorry, I ruined it for you.
I did an entire review about it and completely forgot the film.
They didn't bring him back for the Marvels. I'm sure he's gutted. You know, he didn't get to be
probably saved the remains of his career.
But the real problem is back to what I was saying about the cinematic universe. Is Star Wars is not a cinematic universe. I mean, Star Wars was a trilogy, and then they always planned it as 3 trilogies. I remember in 1978 reading George Lucas talking about this. It was 3 trilogies, and that was the Skywalker story. In the same way that the Corleones are the other big 1970s family, they're the Godfather story. Star Wars was not a universe. You know, they're trying to turn it into Marvel, and they're making all these fake characters you don't care about and all that. You know, but it's because it's a movie.
I think it is a cinematic universe. It's just cross media. And so you've got like the Old Republic games, which are incredibly beloved across gamers, which set up an entirely new series of characters, which will inevitably enter the cinema and also be destroyed then, I'm sure. But it's a lot of these things, if you're not into that medium, can be kind of hidden from you and you don't notice. But going quickly back to the toy thing, I do think that it's kind of well known. Women are into people, men are into stuff. And so if you make IPs which are into, like men are into, then they buy the physical media, they buy the contents and everything else. But Marvel and everyone else has made a determined effort to get women into the movies. Well, they might buy the ticket, but even then, they're probably not into the movies as much as the blokes would be, because movies are stuff. But they're never going to be interested in the majority, into the actual materials and the stuff surrounding it and the toys and everything else. And so by going after that demographic, they cut out the majority of their income in all the physical media.
I think Mark, by the way, just making it clear how much that 9 movie plan, and they perverted the hell out of it and made Rey the Skywalker that the trilogy almost ends on as a note, as opposed to it being about Anakin, then Luke, and then it's like, and then this gross stapled on extra that I mean, and that's besides the fact that they've tried to expand it into a huge universe of awful, you know, entries in so many different ways. I was going to ask as well before we move too far away from it, because I you know, it's my one chance to speak to Chris about it. But he mentioned Star Wars' funeral. What did you think of Red Letter Media taking a shot at you for doing that?
Oh, I love it. I'm just mad they didn't put the link in the description. Funeral. No, look, I have been mentioned a few times on Red Letter Media because I suspect they read Film Threat magazine in college. Just my guess, based on what they bring up. But it wasn't just at me; it bothered me from this standpoint. They've taken shots at you and Drinker and Gary and others. They show thumbnails. They are trying to do the thing like criticize Acolyte, but we don't want to be associated with these guys who also criticize Acolyte. I think it's disingenuous. It's hypocritical. So I did do a short video like discussing like, and I don't cause any problems with other channels. I don't care. You wanna critique my opinion? Fair point. You want to critique my hair? Yeah,
who the hell is going to critique that hair, Chris? It's epic.
Great head of hair.
Love the hair I aspire to, man.
Everyone comments on mine. It's like, for the few years I have left remaining of it.
But make it fair. So I actually just went, look, you guys, you wanna go like, we don't like Acolyte also, but these guys were not like them. Like, come on, guys, it's fine. Have your opinion. It's okay. Yeah. So I felt because they're a big channel, I'll just, I don't go after people, but I am a counter puncher. You know, if you go after me, it's unfair. I will say something. But I was basically sticking up for everyone they were going at.
When I saw it, I thought it was a cheap shot. I was surprised. It just comes in at the end. They just go, it would be like, I think they called you embarrassing for having a stream where you just with some friends talking about Star Wars and how it got fucked, which they agree with, by the way.
What's weird is they said, instead of a funeral, why don't you have guys come on, talk about how much they love Star Wars and show memory? That's exactly what we did. People came on and gave very heartfelt, like what it meant to them, how they saw it. Like this one YouTuber, Madam Savvy, came on, talked about that was like her relationship with her dad was Star Wars. And then we showed like old videos of Star Wars fandom in the 70s and 80s. It was really pretty cool, actually. 7.5 hours. So like maybe half an episode of EFAP. But no, it was fun. I don't know. I like, you know, I'm fine. I'm used to having done Film Threat for longer than I care to point out, but I'm used to that kind of conflict, so whatever. That was fun. That was fun.
Can I give the one upside of Star Wars sucking now?
Yes, please.
Go for it.
Here's the one upside of it, right? And I adore Star Wars, right? I mean, I've been a fan my entire life, but I had this weird realization a couple of weeks ago because I was like, man, it's really awful that I can't enjoy Star Wars anymore. I haven't liked it for so long, you know, any of the new stuff they put out. And then I had this weird thought where I thought, we're exactly as far away from Star Wars in 1977 as 1977 was from Tarzan the Ape Man when it came out in 1930, right? And I just had this weird thought, and I thought, imagine when I was asking my dad to go and see Star Wars in 77, he'd said, no, we're going to go and see Johnny Weissmuller, he's back with Maureen O'Sullivan, and they're doing Tarzan the Ape Man again. And I just suddenly thought, maybe, like, see if they'd let Star Wars die in 1983 or something, you know, when we all loved it. Right. It would have been terrible and we'd have lamented it forever. But maybe all these things that we love that they're ruining, usually Disney one by one, you know, maybe they have to be murdered so that we finally move into new franchises, you know what I mean? So like, and I really felt that when I saw the Ghostbusters back in their 70s, pushed into those flows and Bill Murray getting hounded to come back and all that, you know, and I thought, is it time just for 20 great new franchises we've never seen before? How exciting would that be? Maybe these things have to be terrible before we will allow them to go. Because I love them so much. I mean, my room's a shrine to this stuff, you know. But I'm starting to disconnect from them a little bit because I don't love them anymore. Yeah.
This is a question I guess I was going to ask. In the like, so many of the franchises that we're still clinging on to today were born in the 70s, the 80s. You know, whether it be like Star Trek, whether it be like Star Wars, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, even like all these things, maybe we're progressing to the point where they're not relevant anymore. You're not going to be able to bring them back in a meaningful way. You're not going to be able to tell more stories that actually resonate with people in this universe, or from a business point of view, you're not going to be able to squeeze any more dollars out of these because it's aged out. And potentially, is that a good thing that we are now forced almost by default to start creating new stuff? But are we actually capable of doing it in this day and age?
But people will be forced to, the way that George Lucas didn't get the rights to Flash Gordon, which he really wanted to do. And he made Star Wars. And for me, I think it improved upon Flash Gordon. And I'm the biggest Flash Gordon fan in the world. But Star Wars took that basic concept to another level, the space fantasy thing, you know. And, you know, it's funny. I think quite a lot about the characters that exist between generations. And it's quite rare until now. You know, if you look back at 100 years of culture, you've got Sherlock Holmes, you've got Dracula, Batman, maybe one or two others that actually father, son, and grandson will all be into on a worldwide level. But the Lone Ranger and, you know, the Phantom and all these things, they all just disappear, you know? Commando Cody and these things, they exist for one generation generally.
That's a brilliant point, because the reason Star Wars is dying is, like, I mean, I've been going to Star Wars Celebration since the first one in 1999. And you saw and also I have kids, I have grown adult kids now, but when my kids were young in the 90s, that was a moment to share my love of Star Wars with them. That's not a unique experience And that cycle is now broken. I still believe like Star Trek is Kirk, Spock, McCoy. Star Wars is Han, Luke, and Leia. I mean, Lando and R2 and it's still adjacent family, but that has been broken. And the decision to not unite those three, Han, Luke, and Leia, in one scene even is disastrous. And then to end the sequel trilogy on the granddaughter of the main villain as the survivor in some weird way, dead naming her Palpatine lineage and taking on the Skywalker moniker is an insult. And I think what it is, there will not be the generational fan, like you said, Mark, like Lone Ranger, like there's, these things have existed and you pass on your love for it to, your friends and or family. And that is gone now. And Kathleen Kennedy's legacy, I can't wait for the trial. I'm all about the trial and that deposition. I cannot wait. Go, Gina, go. But like that's gone. Her legacy will be destroying the greatest franchise in film history. It's not even sad anymore. It's tragic, and it's affected the business in ways, because to get people in the theater, they'll see small movies too. That's my bread and butter at Film Threat, is seeing little indie movies that no one knows about, but are very good films. So they suffer when the box office isn't hot. So also, by the way, see a Spanish film called The Coffee Table. Don't read anything about it. Just see it. Trust me.
I keep hearing you mentioning that. I still need to watch it. I've not looked anything up yet. So
as saw it, and we had a whole exchange. Just a Coffee Table, Spanish film. Don't watch the trailer. Don't read a description. Just watch the film. But I think it's really tragic.
I wonder if there's a 27-year-old guy out there, who with a beard and glasses and a little baseball cap, who's got the next Star Wars, and it's
yes.
And our kids are going to love it as much as we love Star Wars, and I think it's inevitable.
It's a difficult environment though to get new films like that made, because I feel like Hollywood, and you can probably correct me on this one, but it feels like they're increasingly risk averse, because if you're going to invest $100 million, 200, even $300 million in a new movie to potentially kickstart a new franchise with lots of special effects, all the rest of it, you want a surefire return on your investment. And that means mining old properties with a built-in fan base, because it's really difficult to get people to get excited and go see a brand new film that doesn't have a built-in fan base. It doesn't have anything to get it going. It's got nothing to build on. It's just like a new idea. That's a difficult thing when you've got hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. And so it becomes easier to just fall back on these old, tired, played out franchises, but have still got the name recognition associated with them. That's the difficult thing.
Godzilla -1 was $15 million, wasn't it? And I know Godzilla's an established brand, but it shows that for $30-40 million, I mean, we made Kick-Ass for $28 million, and we made $240 million by the time you had DVD and Blu-ray and everything back, So all it takes is something to break out. Deadpool's a perfect example. $55 million, 800 million return just in cinemas alone. So somebody's going to do that mid-budget film that just changes everything.
That's what we need. That's what we need, the return of the mid-budget movie. I've been saying this for the past year or two now. We've missed that, because superhero movies have had complete hegemony over the box office, but they cost $200 million each to make.
Yeah.
I also think it's not the IP when regards to any of this. Like, a good movie under an IP is a good movie. For this kind of example, you can look at like Rebel Moon. It was originally under the Star Wars IP. They separated it out. It's still trash because it was made by somebody that couldn't make a good movie. And so it wasn't the IP behind Rebel Moon that was the problem. It was the person making it. But if it had been a good movie, then it would have been a good movie whether it was outside of the IP or inside the IP. So I don't think the overarching thing is essentially the problem. And I think when it comes down to the people making it, when going back quite a while in the conversation now to when you had fun with these IPs, I had fun out of the Batwoman show via making the YouTube stuff. I had fun via the Doctor Who stuff via watching Gary's kind of videos. It's not that these things aren't fun. It's just they're fun from the different direction. They're fun because they're so bad now. People taking the piss out of them is where the entertainment is, and so it is a case of there's definitely entertainment to be had within all these IPs. I still look forward to the stuff, but for different reasons than I intended to, and that's why I don't think there is such a thing as fatigue of a certain thing. It's only whether you can keep up the quality, whether you've got the people involved that can come up with the new ideas. Maybe some things do eventually get drained, but I'm still not sure about that. I think most things could be fit into any kind of universe, but it's the core ideas, the emotions that you feel. It's the values and stuff behind it which make it the quality that it is, rather like window dressing, like the fights and that kind of stuff.
But I think looking at it from the point of view of a YouTube reviewer, like that's a very unique perspective of almost like, oh, the worse this show is, the more fun I can have with it.
All of your viewers have the same perspective. Like,
they do, but then they're not going to want to watch the show necessarily. They're going to watch us react to it and give our thoughts on it and probably tear it to pieces because they know it's going to be bad. But that's not the same thing as actually wanting to get entertainment out of the show itself. So that's a unique circumstance there. Yeah, but that's like an economy of hate, like, you know, of just shitting on things.
Yeah, but my point was more the difference between like because kind of going back like a few different points. The point was more down to original IP versus old IP. I don't think Star Wars is played out. I think if you had the right person with the right ideas, they could make it under the Star Wars brand, or they could make their own original universe. I think somebody who's talented enough could do either. It's just that under the current time, everything is under the older IPs, and they're also employing terrible people because of their hiring practices. So it makes it look as if Star Wars has failed. And so like a medium breakout movie, which I also agree is the best thing to do, make loads of those kind of things and then just pick the best ones and go with there. They will inevitably come under a new original IP because they don't have the budget for like Star Wars, or Star Wars wouldn't hire them. But it doesn't mean it's the IP's problem. It's simply down to the quality of the creator.
I am of the opinion, and I've always felt this way, that like any franchise or genre, right, there's a limit to how much the audience can absorb of that particular thing in a set time period, right? And so if you say you've got the MCU and you have 2 movies per year and they're bangers, like absolutely great movies, people will flock to go see them because they're event films and they're not getting overwhelmed by it. If you release 5 movies per year, then the audience interest is going to start to decline because it's too much. They start to get overwhelmed by it. And even if they were good, they would gradually start to lose interest because it's too much for them to absorb within a
single example of that, though.
What's that?
Have you got a single example of a series of great films coming out of part of a franchise that did not make them money?
No, unfortunately, because it never happens, because as the quantity ramps up, the quality seems to decline.
Because you run out of the quality of people.
That's the unfortunate thing. Yeah,
enough good filmmakers.
I think there's a hypothetical scenario. I suppose like you would have to broaden it out to genres. So that you're wider. So like the Western genre would be the example of, they were still producing great Westerns up until the 70s, when you had the spaghetti Westerns, the Dollars trilogy, all those kinds of films. Like even up until the 80s, people just gradually lost interest in them because they've been getting those same movies since the 1950s or even the 40s actually, and they gradually just moved on. Tastes had changed, and the audience gradually moved on to other things. Even though there were still good movies getting made in that genre, the demand was no longer there.
Well, I think... Can you think of one? Because I would even say, reflecting the MCU, right? We've got superheroes. We've got an all-time low for people's frustration and tiredness with it. However, No Way Home, MOM, of course, Deadpool, Wolverine, and Guardians 3, they were all still very successful. Point being, of course, that despite the fact that we would live in an unprecedented time of superhero fatigue, whatever word you want to use and whatever variables you want to include, there's still room for these films to have great successes. I was just going to say, is there one you're aware of that of like a Western film that everyone was like,
I can steal Manny's argument.
Okay, but I was just going to ask Drinker, is there a Western film you thought, oh fuck, that was so amazing and that didn't do well? That's insane.
The Quick and the Dead. The Quick and the Dead. I think it's a masterpiece and nobody went to see it.
The Quick and the Dead's a weird one, though, because that's very Raimi. Western fans would be... My dad always found Quick and the Dead very odd, and he's a huge Western fan because he wasn't a Sam Raimi fan. So watching that film for him was weird because, as I'm sure you're aware, I'm quite a fan of that film. I think it's really awesome. But like
here's an example for you. Unforgiven, fucking incredible Western, like one of my favorites ever. Made 150 million at the box office. Not a huge hit. So, like, I guess that's like.
Well, but what was the budget?
Hold on a second.
I think the best argument for this is what you were talking about at the start of the stream, where you're not in this year. There were so many good movies that were all made at the same time, so you can prove that people will keep going back to the cinema to consume this stuff. The problem is simply the quality of it. I mean, I would argue that the reason why we don't get so many good movies and so many people going to so many good movies in a year anymore is simply that you have a few studios who all hire the same people. They all have the same views. They all look at the world the same way. They all have the same values and everything else. And so people just don't like that. And so it turned them off the cinema, because I'm still of the opinion that the cinema is a horrible way to watch movies as it is. I hate the cinema.
Well, we can talk about that if you want.
Hard disagree. I love the movies.
Well,
American cinema is very different. I do think this is an American-British thing. Americans love the interaction of the stuff. They love the cheering and the laughing and the clapping. That's horrific over here.
Brits don't do that at all.
Brits don't like each other, right?
I sat through Deadpool and Wolverine, really packed cinema. Nobody laughed, nobody clapped, nobody cheered. Like, no, it's not done.
I love going to see films in America, though, and sometimes I'll fly out just to see a movie that I'm really looking forward to with an American audience. Because Americans are...
Now, that is a flex. That's a big flex.
Sometimes I get on my private jet.
Why not?
But you know, like a big event movie, you've got to be sitting with New Yorkers. You know, like you sit with British people, and you're right. Even the most hilarious bit, they're like, you know, a gentle clap or something. But Americans are standing up and screaming and everything. It's fantastic. I love it.
Well, you know, to harken back to the point we were making about like budget relative to what we expect to make. The example I was going to bring up here from the Marvel perspective is Captain America: Brave New World. That's going to top the scales at over 400 million. When you factor in the reshoots, it's gone through 3 rounds of major reshoots. So essentially, you've had 3 movies made out of this in the time that it's taken, and when you're getting over $400 million for your budget, you're talking about $1 billion just to break even. That you've set yourself an impossible benchmark in terms of box office success.
That's absolutely true, and I don't believe it has a fucking snowball's chance in hell of getting that money back in any way, shape, or form. I don't think anybody does. Meanwhile, obviously, if they had, you know, knuckled down, got a director who knows what they're doing, a writer who gives a shit, and then really shrunk the budget down as much as possible, maybe they could make their money back. Because I was curious, since you brought it up, because I've never actually, despite Unforgiven being one of my favorite films of all time, I've never actually looked into how it did. Because obviously I was, wait, was it 90? When did
92?
92. So yeah, I was surprised. So it got 159 million on 14.4 million as a budget, which I think is excellent, isn't it? As the result, like that's a 14.4 up to 160.
Yeah, I'm kind of pissed off with that actually, because I think the fact that it had Gene Hackman, Clint Eastwood, and Morgan Freeman in it, I assumed it was going to cost a lot more than 14 million to get made.
I'm only bringing this up because I love the movie, but it says received widespread critical acclaim with praise for the directing, editing, theme, cinematography, acting, particularly from Eastwood and Hackman. If you haven't seen Unforgiven, anybody in the audience, go watch it. It's amazing.
Yes,
Clint Eastwood is only 59 in that movie, though, which blows my mind. He's 4 years younger than Tom Cruise is now. He's like J-Lo's age practically. It's insane.
I mean, he lived a hard life, and he like all that grimacing, you know, and that stare, like it just ages you, I suppose. But
I do think that Disney is pushing the Captain America movie back further and further, so this 400 million doesn't matter when they collapse the global economy next year. You know, it's like
it could well be.
The Great Reset's going to be in full swing by this point, you know, so it'll be okay. You know?
But I just, you know, it's a movie that if it had been done on half the budget, it might have had a chance, I suppose, because I don't think people were particularly enthused by a new Captain America. I think we would have much rather had a Falcon movie with Falcon just being Falcon, because like he was a pretty popular character. I think people like the actor.
Dude, I genuinely think you cannot underestimate how confused people will be. It's like Captain America 4, but who's that guy? You'd be like, oh well, you needed to. This is actually a point where people will be like, well, if you saw a TV show, you'd know that he has the shield now. And you'd be like, what?
And Chris, you can probably clue us in a little bit on this. Like, as I understood it, the first version of this that they showed to test audiences tested horrendously because it was super loaded with like current deisms. It was very like racially focused. It was very like, I'm pretty sure the bad guys were just an analogy for Trump or whatever. The usual stuff, and like audiences hated it, and they essentially had to go back and remake the entire movie.
So I know someone who's seen both cuts, and the first one was unwatchable, just terrible. And they added Esposito into the second version, which is better, but only from an action story standpoint. The big weakness is Sam Wilson has no internal journey, right? You have to have some character journey if you're a lead protagonist. He doesn't have one. And also there's just logic things. There's a big thing throughout the film. Will he take the serum? Will he not? We see Red Hulk, from what I'm told, you see Red Hulk punching Sam Wilson holding the shield, which makes no sense. He would be crushed. His arm, I mean, the shield is supposed to absorb the energy. Nothing. There's no logic to it. It's just, I think it's going to be a mess. I think it will be a dud and bomb. And then, a few months later in May, you've got Thunderbolts, which is like I said, it's dollar store Suicide Squad. So it's the next year of Marvel will be a lot of misses, and Fantastic Four, we'll see. From what I saw, it looks cool, but that's one aspect,
I think Brave New World is going to open strong. I think it's going to have a big opening weekend, and then I think it'll collapse on week 2.
Yes,
because I think they will go all out with the marketing. They will do everything to make this movie, because you have to. If you've spent $400 million just getting the thing made, you have to go all out to try and promote it. And you got some big stars. You got Harrison Ford in it, so like that's something. Or at least it was until, in D5.
Yeah, but does anyone care about a Captain America film with a new actor? Because I don't.
Well, so
I don't either. No.
How much would a Chris Evans Captain America 4 get everybody to go to the cinema? I'm not even 100% clear on that.
Huge.
I don't know. I don't know.
I think we're Robert Downey Jr.
Because like, what has he done since Marvel?
I don't think it's as sure a thing as is being implied here. Because like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, I can see that being huge, but
I think
being
Chris
like Chris Evans is
nostalgia.
I don't think it's as powerful.
I think, well, there's a great amount of enthusiasm towards his version of Cap. Steve Rogers, like,
for sure, yeah.
I think if you were to bring him back in some capacity, like there would be some excitement around that. But that's the problem. It's just a gimmick. Like it's just like, hey, we brought the original guy that you liked back.
Superman's an interesting one for next year, though, because I think Superman capitalized on the Marvel love, but the heat has moved into a whole new fresh space where you don't have to have seen 40 TV shows. And
I was going to ask your take on this, actually. Like, what do you think about James Gunn's rebooting of the DCEU? Like, do you think he's got a potential to turn this into the next Marvel Cinematic Universe, or is it just going to be he's picking over the coals of this burned out genre?
I think timing's everything, and like I say, I think the superhero thing has got 30 years like most other dominant genres, and it's in the final 10 years of that. So I don't think you're going to get Marvel level stuff, but I think as long as they don't flood it, and they pick the projects carefully, I think they'll do great. And I think James Gunn's a guy I would never count out. I mean, I remember seeing the posters for Guardians, and I've always loved James Gunn. I was into Slither and all these things he'd done before he was a famous director, and I'd been in touch with him when he was making Super and everything, got quite friendly with him. But I remember seeing the poster for Guardians and thinking, oh, is this hubris? Is this going to work? It was the first time I actually thought Marvel might be slightly off beam, and he nailed it. It's like you can and I know Suicide Squad didn't do so well, but I loved it. I thought it was a great film. He did a really great job with it, and I know his passion for Superman's there. and he's saying all the right things. The costume, I'm a little bit iffy on, you know, maybe a little bit iffy in the costume, but I think I know what he's doing. I think what his plan is, you know, Superman was the world's first superhero and everything, you know, and he tends to exist on his own in these origin movies. But I suspect what he's doing with this is making Superman a commentary on what's going on with the superhero market just now, which is, it's a very crowded market. It's kind of dark. It's kind of silly, corporate and everything, you know, all these characters like he has with Maxwell Lord badges on their costumes and everything. And Superman's going to be the guy who shows up and shows you how it should really have been done. And he's the original guy is back, you know, and he's unlike anything else because he's so far away in 1938, you know, that suddenly seems quite fresh again. A really sincere Boy Scout guy who does the right thing. And I think he's going to do something beautiful with this. I think it's going to be like an American fable. And the fact, for the first time ever now, technology's caught up with these kind of stories. We're going to see the popular Silver Age Superman, which was peak Superman, really, you know, that 1955 to 1970 Superman with bottle cities and alien computers, Superman going to other worlds, pet super dogs and everything. And I think he's the guy who'll get this. I think I mean, I could be eating my words here in a year's time and you can all laugh at me, but I've just got a feeling this is going to work.
My question would be, if the aim is to like reboot everything and show you how it should be done, shouldn't it be his first movie?
What do you mean?
Like, Superman isn't the first movie in his series, right? He's going to do something first that leads into Superman. So if the aim is to reboot the superhero genre, as this is the way you were supposed to be doing it all along, shouldn't he have started with that character?
I thought it was the first movie.
No, it's the first one.
No, are we not getting like Creature Commandos or something? Like
that's not a movie.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Like an animated TV show or something, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And I think the idea is that superheroes have been around for a long time, but they've just taken a wrong turn, which I think is a pretty good commentary on the current superhero market. But Superman's going to come in and do the course correct. So it exists on that meta level as well. I hope so.
I love the idea. At this point as well of like, you know, we've gotten to the point of like parody, subversion, all the rest of it. It's almost like a fresh take, excuse me, to have a character that's just sincere and relatively simple, like Superman, pure, just he wants to do good. He's got great power and he's willing to wield it the best way that he can to help people. That I think is the best way to do it at this point, I think.
I actually think that's a great theme, especially with what the world is today. To have an optimistic superhero, that's like in contrast to everything else. I think it will really hit the zeitgeist and people will respond because like they've lost the plot of what makes a hero. A hero, especially if you look at Phase 4 and all the Marvel stuff post Endgame, it's a hero involves self-sacrifice. A hero does things that are heroic, not like Wanda in WandaVision or all this nonsense we've seen. It's dark and not anything to look up to. So what James Gunn, what I've seen the comments, I think that is really smart and could really resonate with people and is a message we kind of need now. I mean, I don't know. Have you read the news? Pretty dark.
Remember, Superman was created in 1938 at the worst time in American history, you know? Right. It was something to lift people out of what was literally the Depression. And I think right now, as we head into another one, you know, as we're heading into potentially the end of America, you know, like as a global unipower, it's certainly slipping. I think it's exactly what Americans in particular really want to see. Something that the guy literally wearing the flag on his chest and representing the best of the country. It's not red states and blue states. He's got both of them on his costume. And I think they're going to walk out that cinema feeling 10 feet tall if you're American, if they do this right. I think it could be amazing.
I hope they get to, you know, do the proper, like, patriotic version of Superman where he stands for truth, justice, and the American way. Because, you know, I know that... Happen, though. I know the comic books have tried to, like, eradicate that in recent years.
I will put money on that being the case. I'll put money on it just from the conversations I've had with people. I think it's going to be super patriotic. I think it's going to be flags, everything that makes you feel good about America. That's my guess. I think it's going to be a post-ironic Superman, I think.
Because I struggle, you know, when I look at James Gunn as a filmmaker, I struggle to place him in terms of like where he sits with all this stuff, because I feel like his natural niche is to be a little bit like subversive, a little bit irreverent to the superhero genre. That's where I feel like Suicide Squad or Peacemaker is his natural home in terms of his sensibilities as a filmmaker. And so I look at those were good fun. I'm not taking anything away from them in terms of their enjoyment factor, but I just think, is he the guy who can then take on a superhero movie like Superman and do it in a way that feels honest and genuine and heartfelt and just straight up, I suppose is what you want in something like this.
Because I think he's got more than one film in him, I know Guardians, tonally is very different from this, but I think this is going to feel like a Jimmy Stewart movie, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I think that's the casting of David Corenswet in particular. There's a wholesomeness to that guy, and there's a sweetness to this. I think it's going to be romantic. I think it's going to be epic. Again, save all this and play it back and laugh at me now.
Yeah. The internet is forever, unfortunately. No, I mean, I hope it's true. I honestly do. I think that's probably it's definitely what DC needs at this point, and to some extent, maybe the superhero genre in general needs a bit of just old-fashioned sincerity, I suppose, and getting back to its roots. I think that's the direction they should aim to go. I hope they can do it. I really do. I don't know what direction this is going to go. I was curious as well, because I know the other big offshoot of the superhero genre is shows like The Boys, where it's very subversive and very particularly with the recent seasons, it's gone into just shock factor, what kind of body horror thing can we get in this episode? What's your take on that, and where that sits within the great pantheon of superhero fiction?
Well, it's real quick on back to Superman, real quick, and then back to that. It's as if Superman appears in a world where the types of heroes that are on The Boys exist, that they kill people, they murder, they're terrible behind the scenes, they're just generally awful people. I think it's really The Boys is more a commentary on Hollywood. It's like Superman appears and says, "No, we're not going to kill. No, we're gonna remain morally, we are going to have morals," and that's where he is. But that last season of The Boys was a lot of terrible moments. I was not super happy, and they can't do the ending from the comics the way they've played things out. They've changed too many things, so I'm not super excited about that.
Mark, what do you feel about The Boys as a show?
I'm a little bit behind on it, but I really enjoy it. To me, all these things they just have to be good. There's no correct way of doing superheroes. I think doing, The Boys has to be done with an ironic twist to it, doesn't it? Superman would obviously be done differently. You do Batman, you do it differently again. That's what I think. Superheroes is so broad, you can do anything with it, and it's all good. It just has to be quality, doesn't it? And I love Eric Kripke. I think Eric Kripke is fantastic. Just a wee plug for my podcast. I'm getting him on in a couple of weeks' time as well.
That's great.
Nice. No, I mean, I think I kind of lost interest in The Boys after season 3. I kind of slogged through it, and I was like, okay, some aspects of this are still enjoyable, but I feel like they're going more and more for the gory kind of crude shock factor of it. A lot of the characters are starting to become parodies of themselves. They're not as smart, they're not as sharp, they're not as witty as they used to be. And I guess the sort of political pandering of it started to get more and more overt to the point where it's like, okay, I feel like the show's just straight up lecturing me now over how I should feel about things. Whereas season 1 and 2, it was more balanced, and it was more it just encourages you to see things from a different perspective, and it kind of mocked a lot of different aspects of modern culture with a more even hand, I suppose. Whereas I feel like just it became super overt and partisan, the more it progressed, and it just became a little bit harder to enjoy, I suppose, to the point where I just wasn't that excited to watch season 4.
Season 1 in particular was very even-handed. I liked that because even as a Scotsman with no horse in the race, I have nothing to do with American politics. American shows are so heavy-handed, and I like the fact that it was like Dirty Harry. Season 1 was like Dirty Harry. It hated everyone, and that was cool, wasn't it? Everybody was a target, and everybody could be laughed at.
The showrunner wouldn't disagree with you, though, Drinker, because he said in one of the interviews for season 4 that as writers, we're getting more petrified of the real world. And so as we get more scared, it shows in our writers. We get more extreme, we get more obvious, because this becomes more important to us. It really reeked as a guy who was literally petrified of the world, and it just shows through in his stuff. He got more partisan because he felt more partisan in real life, and he just admitted it. That is one thing about The Boys. He has never, in any of his interviews, hidden that this is an entirely partisan show, and he wanted everybody to know it. And he wanted the audience to know what he thought of them. In fact, a lot of times when people thought he was being even-handed, he wasn't. Like, I don't know whether it was in season 2 or 3, but they enter like an arena and it's got like woke hot dogs and stuff. That wasn't meant to be a criticism of the woke hot dog. It was meant to be a criticism of the company that would make the woke hot dog. So it wasn't the idea behind it. It was the fact that somebody would exploit a good idea for profit. And so I think that interpretation can lead people down a thing of think this is more unbiased than it actually was.
Well, I feel like the focus in the early seasons was on corporate activism, like big companies that pretend to care about social political causes, but actually they're just doing it for profit to mask like their own nefarious purposes and stuff.
Like
and it's like, okay, yeah, exactly. Like, Vought was just a stand-in for Disney. Like for all intents and purposes, and it's like, okay, fine, like that's an interesting thing that you can play with. But like when you get to the level of like, no, we're not even doing that now. We're just like straight up telling you need to feel a certain way politically. You need to feel this way on all these different social causes, and if you don't, you're a monster and you belong in this category. That's not subversion. That's just propaganda at that point. And I feel like that's where The Boys started to cross the line. And I started to lose interest in it, I suppose. And like, I just never felt compelled to watch season 4.
I hate to quote Liberace, right? But I remember Liberace saying in the 70s, he never talked politics because he would half his audience.
Yes.
And it's something that weirdly we've forgotten over the last 10 years. Like,
that's because people saw it as the right side of history. So rather than being two different perspectives that were equally valuable, now there has always been a correct path, and we've always gone along that path. And so there is a correct side of history that you will be on, and an evil side of history that people will hate you for. And they see themselves as on the correct side, and so anyone opposite them is innately evil.
And I think Liberace might have been gay.
Holy shit, what other bangers are you gonna come out with tonight, Chris?
I feel like the other aspect of The Boys is not getting enough attention too is season 1 had much more of a story to tell. I was very fond of season 1. I was very happy that it existed. I thought it was a really great exploration of a hypothetical. It's like, what if some of the superheroes, they don't necessarily all have to just be evil, quote unquote, but reckless or drug addicted or very much influenced by exclusively money or so power hungry that they'll do anything to blah blah blah, and they all have different sets of powers. Like, what if accidentally one of them, like the Flash, just runs through your loved one day on the way of doing whatever he's doing and then just fucks off? It's like, that's horrifying. And I remember just being like, whoa, that's a bold start to the story. I'm interested. And then of course you have him teaming up with someone whose issue is with Homelander specifically, right? Butcher having a direct with Homelander, which is like the one person you don't want to be having a personal vendetta with because he's the Superman of the universe. You explore, you push out all these different things in all these different directions, and specifically Starlight being the like her story in season 1 is really strong. Getting this innocent, wide-eyed young girl who wants to help the world. She represents your average sort of plucky hero who's getting ground down by the system and every single thing that, however it all works. And then she gets to make a choice at the end of whether or not she's going to completely sell out, follow the rest, and be corrupted by the system, or to push back. And she does push back. But then you get to season 2, and that's the one where I'd already given up. I felt like the storytelling was starting to take a complete backseat, where we were instead really focusing on what we wanted to say about the real world. And a lot of storylines ended up getting repeated or became thinner. I felt like the character journeys were becoming less and less, meaningful, and a lot of crazy plot holes and stretches started to get involved in order to put particular people in particular places. And 3 and 4 I've only tracked thinly, but the way I see it is a lot of shows that get talked about online or shared in whatever way, shape, or form you can imagine. It's oftentimes you'll get a whole plethora of different ways that they're shared, be it they're big moments or meaningful things or actors talking about this, that, and the other thing. Every time, without fail, with The Boys, it'll be a clip lasts about 30 seconds. Someone's head explodes. Someone says the naughty words, or some crazy explosion happens every single time. And it's always like, wow, this was shocking. Anyway, when's the next season? Like, it's
is the casting. I think the casting is genius in that show. Like, one thing I've really realized over time is how important casting is. Like, even if there's a weak season, if you like those characters, like Homelander is one of the best pieces of casting in the last 20 years. It's up there with Tony Soprano in superhero terms, I think, you know. And I love Butcher. I love, Jack Quaid. Everybody in that show is great.
I think, I can't fault them in terms of casting, Anthony Starr as Homelander and, Billy Butcher and stuff. Like, they're all excellent bits of casting, but I think the point, as MauLer was making there, is that when the writing starts to get more overt and less story focused and more about just making points politically, I guess that's when you start to lose your audience. And even if it's on a subconscious level, because a lot of people won't be analyzing it like particularly deeply, they'll just get that sense of this is not as enjoyable as it was last season, or like a few episodes ago or whatever. And that's when they start to tune out a little bit. And I feel like that's where it's been heading. But then, guys like Eric Kripke, as a showrunner, instead of just responded to that and said like, no, we're still like all about telling a good story. We're just, we're exploring different ideas and stuff. He seems to, as far as I can tell from like his interviews and stuff, he just leans 100% into the politics. And he's like, no, like, we're straight up on one side of the political divide, and if you disagree with us, you can just go fuck off and die. And I just think it's not really what you want to be doing as a showrunner. Like, you kind of want to be the purveyor of entertainment. You want to sell people on your show and encourage them to give it a try, I suppose, rather than berating them for not loving it.
Because there's so many things, I guess, online that you can quite easily miss stuff. But I've strangely missed all that, and I've just seen it as a show, and I think it has slightly leaned into one side, but like I say, I think what my point was that if you like a world and a cast, it can get you through even weaker seasons though as well, like so much of it based around wanting to be in that world for an hour, isn't it?
I think it feeds into the point that I think Disparu made previously, where it's like long-running franchises, long-running shows where you've got a huge amount of goodwill of the fan base. It takes a certain amount of time to burn through that. It was the same with Star Wars. It was the same with Marvel. Like, it's not like one bad movie will just suddenly turn everyone against you. It takes time. But if you consistently put out increasingly poor products, gradually you will turn that fan base against you. And it doesn't take all that much. A few consistently bad shows or a few consistently bad movies, they will start to dislike what you're doing, and they will be more harsh in their judgment of what you produce after that.
You got to be careful too. We saw with Eric Kripke, he had focused more so on a particular half, which you can do if you want to, and the repercussions of that will be you'll lose a half of the audience, sure. But of the ones that remained very passionately in favor of him, they did not like the treatment of Huey in the season later on, to do with the sexual abuse stuff. And man, that's a potential fire he had to put out. I was seeing shit tons of very viral tweets saying like this is disgusting sort of thing in terms of his comments in relation to what happened to Huey when
he thought it was funny, didn't he?
Yeah, and maybe there's a better way to have explained it rather than, because the way he says it in the interview makes it seem like he has no idea that anyone would have taken it in a bad way. And so maybe if he knew that, he'd be able to explain it a bit better. But yeah, his comments didn't go down well with a lot of people, and he got in some trouble with the very people that he would have courted with what the show is more so about than the later seasons, because they don't want you laughing at, sexual abuse, whether male or female. Which, to be fair, I kind of agree with that. It's kind of annoying, right, as a double standard. The season one is very good commentary on stuff like that within industries such as Disney. The more time goes on, the more information we get on what goes on in relation to that. But to then flip that on a man and laugh at it, it's like, I
think it's always been a bit of a trope in Hollywood. Like, if it comes to, like, say if it's just something as simple as getting kicked in the groin, if it happens to a man, it's funny. If it happens to a woman, ooh, that's abuse. Like, that's horrible. I don't like that. And it's like, well, it's still ultimately hurting a person in a very intimate way. And it's just like the power dynamics there, particularly in the case of someone like Huey, where he straight up is a prisoner and he gets abused by someone in a position of power. Gender goes out the window there. It's about the power dynamics of it, and like ultimately a human being is getting assaulted and abused. That's not funny, and that's not something that you should laugh at ever,
if you can believe it. Sorry,
the season 4 numbers, are they down on season 3?
As far as I know, they're up.
They're up.
As far as I know, in conclusion, the season 4 viewership is up from the last season. So good for them. I suppose.
Rising
the audience score isn't up. That's for sure.
No. As far as I know, I only saw some tweets about it. I've got no numbers for you. But I was just going to say, if you would believe it, Drinker, he got in trouble for that again later in the season. Another thing happens where Huey gets into another situation that's not the show. You know how we talk about this sometimes? The show / the movie has an opinion on the event, like that takes place. Something happens. I'm trying to avoid spoilers just in case for Mark's sake, but like something happens and the show's perspective is very much not taking him seriously as to what he went through again. And I was seeing people talk about it again. I was like, oh god, it's too late. Obviously, the show's done. As in, like, it's completed, so you can't change that based on how people have been responding to the episodes.
Yeah.
Do you know, I saw somebody about 5 minutes ago in the feed. I was just looking at it, and they said, I have no idea what Mark Millar is saying. You're like, no.
You probably get that a lot.
2 hours in. But what's interesting is they all understand Drinker.
I know. Yeah.
What the hell's going on?
Well, I've got this smooth Edinburgh accent, so I've learned to hone it over years so that people can actually understand me. Because if I talk like normal, people would
It'd be funny if it turned out Chris had no idea what Mark was saying this whole time.
Just nodding.
Scottish. Really got a deep accent.
I was going to suggest just before we finish up this evening, if we could perhaps do a few of the super chats that have come in, try and answer some people's questions. If you guys got like 10-15 minutes. Not Kevin Feige said that the MCU is back. That Kevin Feige guy sure is a genius. Yeah, sure.
No.
Okay, I'm sure it'll be fine. Spaceman says, MauLer, Deadpool 3 is an unfunny, key-jangling mess. MauLer, when Welshpool shows up. 10 out of 10. Best film of the year. The MCU is back. Wales has the best flag ever.
I did feel personally pandered to with that one. I was like, oh, that's fun. But
you see the tweet that Reynolds put out as well, where it's like Welshpool was actually the most dangerous of the Deadpools as well. Like,
one of my kids asked me a couple of weeks ago if Wales was a real place.
I'm still not convinced that it is.
She thought it was like a Lord of the Rings kind of thing, and I was like, there's actually people who live there.
Lord of the Rings.
I'm reliably informed they lived in holes in the ground as well. So.
Yeah, I keep an eye on them over here. We're okay for now.
Davy Jones says, MauLer, give us catch-ups and video game streams soon.
I trying to, dude, with recent, it's been insane the amount of different things I've had to be on shows full covering things. The way we keep saying is Boogie and Acolyte together was insane. Having to the amount of work, the amount of editing was. But I'm past that, and we've got a bit of a time before we hit the Rings of Power stuff. So trying to enjoy this gap and maybe play some games.
Yeah. Oh well, we're going to do some Firefly reviews as well. So
yes,
we got that as well. Northern English Bastard says, Dear Drinker, MauLer, and guests, is it just me, or would Robert Downey Jr. as Osiris be better cast as Black Panther? Yes, I would happily pay to see that happen.
See, if they did that, I would be like, holy shit, they're actually like, wow, Disney, that's pretty fun.
Well, no, they have got accused of whitewashing as it is because the character's Romanian, right? And so they don't like that, apparently. It's literally any excuse to get offended at this point by it.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, I say go all in, yeah. Lincoln Osiris, put him in as Black Panther. I'm all in favor of that. Dark Hour says, I want Robert Downey Jr. as everyone, like an Eddie Murphy film. I've seen the I've seen the photoshopped poster for that. It was pretty good. Davy Jones says, hey Drinker, why are member messages going unread? I think that's the way that YouTube displays this. So when it's live and I'm doing it now, I can see member posts. But like if I then do like a super chat catch up, it somehow hides them, or I don't see them, or whatever.
I think you're right. Yeah, like I don't know why they haven't updated it yet. Like, no offense, I know that they pay us, but YouTube, what the fuck are you doing, you morons? Like, can you please put the messages in the messages section? I know it's like, yeah, but it's memberships. It's like, yes, but they come with a message. Just put it in the section.
Yeah, and like, how the fuck else am I supposed to see my messages from channel members? Like, if I miss it on the stream and then I want to catch up with it later, how do I see it? Like, come on, YouTube. It's 2024. You have the technology. I believe in you. You can do this. Paul Stramby says, Yo, Drinker, is there any chance that we can order Rogue Elements on physical media? I mean, like, we're going to be releasing it onto YouTube so everyone can see it anyway. There might be potential to do, like, a DVD or a Blu-ray release.
That'd be fun, yeah.
With all the, because there's a whole bunch of like behind the scenes featurettes. We can do director's commentary and that sort of thing. If you're into that, like, God, let's pretend that it's 2003 again, when
that
sort of thing. For
there'll be some guy selling it behind the pub on DVD, guaranteed in Glasgow, isn't there? That's inevitable.
And it'll be me. Failed the Turing test, says, meh. Robert Downey Jr. And Scarlett Johansson and everyone shot his wad when he said that Trump was a threat to democracy. Fuck you too, Bob. Well, I mean, like, they're entitled to have whatever opinions they want. Ultimately, I'm interested in what kind of performance they could turn in and whether they're actually worth bringing back into the MCU. That's where I sit with this, I suppose. Marksman says, shout out to Mia Malkova, one of the better Star Wars actresses in recent memory, who follows Drinker and MauLer. Did an amazing turn as Princess Leia for adults only. So is she like from the hub, is she?
Where she said she's been in better Star Wars movies than The Acolyte.
I can believe that. I would rather watch them as well.
Absolutely, it's
she was very good.
It's a weird time we're in, culturally speaking.
Yeah,
but I'm okay with it.
So Mia, give me a call. Anyway, Deval says, MauLer, we kindly request a streamers and content creators ultimate showdown. Bookie's Tipples with his gun versus Hassan's chair and XQC's worm.
Oh my god, can the universe actually deal with that kind of clash? I don't know.
I can't handle the Tipples.
The Tipples are too much power.
Tipples!
Have you seen the edit that's going around from a lot of people where he's like they squeeze him into like, he's got weird proportions, and I saw a tweet that went viral saying, when I release my gnome from its Tesseract prison, and it's just him going, Tipples!
I think it dates back to the days when we were doing the fight between him and Wings, right? And someone, like, when we were watching him train, said he's got really unusually short arms. And then ever since I've seen video of him, I can't unsee it. And he's got like little T-Rex arms. Like whenever he's flailing around, is like, ah!
Dude, well, yeah, that was
just weirdly small.
Wings practically doubled his reach, so it was just over from the get-go. Yeah.
It was fun. Sorry, Mark. Yeah, for context here, it's two content creators on YouTube who both used to be popular back in the day, but they've just become laughing stocks, I suppose. And they decided to do a celebrity boxing match, but they both weigh about 200 tons each. So it was quite the scene.
You could describe them as spherical, and you'd be accurate.
Yeah,
I was actually just Googling them just as you were talking because I didn't know these guys at all, So.
Yeah, Boogie was once had a reputation as the nice guy of YouTube, and then he got unmasked gradually as like a horrendous piece of shit. So
I was gonna say, not only that, just so Mark understands, one of the most popular YouTubers, getting millions of views per vlog, talking about his day. That's all he had to do, and he was seen as the nicest person in history who's been through so much and yet survived it. These days, the recent development is he lied about having cancer in order to help scam his audience with a cryptocurrency pump and dump.
Oh my god, that's amazing. What's the guy called? What's his name?
Boogie 2988.
That's like right.
The legend himself.
Do you know, I've always found, though, that see the people who kind of seem really, really nice in showbiz, they're always the absolute worst. And the guys who you think will be horrible are always really nice, you know? It's like the people who play the villains are always really nice guys every time. It's like the guys who write horror novels are always lovely people. The guys who do like Bugs Bunny and all that, it's like they're terrifying.
You got to watch out for the Bugs Bunny ones. You know?
It's because the people that you see as horrible people, they're just disagreeable. So they don't care what you think about them. So they'll just be honest with you. Where all the nice guys, they're putting on an act for you. So they appear nice until you find out what they're actually like.
Yeah, the minute people are talking about the environment and all this kind of thing, you know, I'm always very suspicious of celebrities. They're covering up for some terrible crime you're about to find out about. You know?
Yeah, they talk about the environment on their private jet with you.
Oh yeah. Deval says, "Have you seen the Acolyte pitch meeting from Ryan George? It's brilliant. This place is made of stone, so the fire spreads quickly." Yeah, I've seen that one. I actually just watched it today. It's really good. Yeah, they never fail to deliver the pitch meeting guys. M8566 says, "Who do you think is the MCU's anchor being, and why is it obviously Madison from She-Hulk?"
Do you think people are going to remember who that is?
I don't remember.
I remember.
And I remember. Sorry, I reviewed the show, and
I'm actually kind of sad that I remember.
It's got to be Tony. Like if you were going to be serious, like the anchor being for the MCU is Tony Stark.
It was Stan Lee, and when
the idea of an anchor being. Sorry, I just think the idea of an anchor being is stupid.
Correct.
Yeah, it's dumb. So there you go.
But it was Stan Lee, wasn't it? Like after Stan died, Marvel was never the same. I feel he was the anchor being for it all. It really was.
Yeah, I think I agree with Chris's take as well. Like in the context of like a fictional universe, it's like, so if a person just dies naturally of old age and they're the anchor being for that universe, does the universe just wither and die because that person died out?
Why? The more obvious question is, what the fuck were the universe doing before they were born?
Yeah,
well, it was worse than this.
It was waiting for them.
It was waiting for them.
They said he died in such like an emotional way. That's what killed the universe. It was that he died in a good way, sacrificing himself. That was why, if he'd not been involved at all, then it wouldn't have even affected the universe. He was too good.
Because I do like, I kind of like the idea from a dramatic point of view of canon events, like what you got in the Spider-Verse movies, where there are certain irrevocable events that are going to happen no matter what you try to do to change them. Because I think from a writing point of view, you can do a lot of interesting things around that. Knowing that a certain thing's going to happen, knowing that a certain person has to die, and trying everything in your power to prevent it. But ultimately, it's going to fail because that person has to die for the rest of the story to continue. That's a pretty interesting concept to play with. But like the ideas of just people who exist, like they're very just being alive is what keeps a universe going. That's weak.
Well, it just wasn't even weak when that happens. You know, this happened in the writer's strike. That idea, you know. So
yeah,
I was going to say what makes it even weaker, Drinker, is like, how do you counter something like that? How do you fix it? And at the end, they just go, "It's fixed. Don't know how.
Good enough for me." Yeah, that's fine. I like that. Slack Attack says, "Question for the panel. Who is your favorite movie villain of all time? I'm particularly fond of Edward Longshanks from Braveheart, though I do have tremendous love for Dr. Lecter." So, favorite villains of all of
maybe
cinema.
I'll go first because my answer is going to be the number one on like the top 100 lists that have ever been made in the past few decades or whatever. But Darth Vader, specifically in Empire, he's been my like favorite movie villain forever. It's what a glorious fucking performance, what immense presence. The fact that everyone who speaks to him, he'll have a really sharp and arguably witty line that completely scares them. While he's like a robot or cyborg wizard, you know, wizard. It's almost like a B movie idea, right? That's part of what is amazing about Star Wars. It went to be so incredibly popular, even though that could easily have failed in a lot of ways. And he's like the archetype and the destructive element for the future of villains because so many people have tried to copy him and failed miserably. But I don't quite want to say lightning in a ball. I would rather say almost that everyone worked so hard to put all those pieces together, from costume to the way he walks around, the choreography of the fights, the relationship with all the characters, and then the ultimate story. That, man, what a fucking brilliant villain that set the course for like the future of films in so many different ways. Some positive, some negative. Love Darth Vader. What a great guy. I hope they never use him ever again in Star Wars.
Yes.
I'm going to say Biff Tannen from fucking Back to the Future, because like in almost every reality and every version of him you see, he's just a complete and total asshole to everyone he meets. And his assholeness actually spreads to like not just his like descendants, but his ancestors as well. So Buford Tannen is just like this crazy drooling gunslinger who is also a complete dick. And then Griff is like a cybernetically enhanced, absolutely insane asshole in the future. So I love every part of him. I just love how he never misses an opportunity to be a complete dick to everyone around him. Even like little kids who are playing ball in the street, he just grabs their football and like throws it over the roof of like a nearby house just to be an asshole to them. So yeah, he's my favorite.
For me, it's got to be Jaws. Like Jaws in Jaws. Like he's just a total arse, aren't they? You know, it's like he's no redeeming features at all. there's no complexity. He just swims about and he eats people. You know?
He just wants to eat, though. He's just trying to stay alive. You know,
he's the best explanation
as well. You know?
Yeah,
that's true. You know, he's trying to live his life. That's all he did. There's nothing wrong, really. Those humans had to fuck with him. That was his ocean, all right?
Who's the real monster in that one? They're like out to murder him.
For me, they'd be from TV series, but I think I'm pretty sure I gave this response the last time I was on as well. Was Arvin Sloane and Raymond Reddington. Raymond Reddington, because he's always got a story ready, no matter what situation he's in. He's got a story that also carries a message that you need to know, otherwise you're about to die. And Arvin Sloane, similar for Raymond Reddington in the fact that he likes keeping secrets, and there's powers in the secrets that you keep. And so he always had something else that he could bring out because of some piece of information that he knew, which he had no reason to keep secret, but he just enjoyed it, and there was always an extra use for more knowledge.
May I say, what a wonderful reference to Alias of all things. Good job. High five.
I mean, it's literally where my name came from. I reference Alias quite a lot.
Oh, how come I've not noticed that then? Because I feel like I'm one of the only
SD6 section Disparu 6.
Oh, neat. Because I feel like one of the 5 people who watched Alias. Is, you know, hey, how you doing?
I do like this. I do like this random comment as well. Someone just pitched in with Bennett from Commando, which is just fucking brilliant. Yeah. Any like chubby middle-aged man with a beer belly who's willing to take on Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime is okay with me. So I love him.
Can't remember his name, but the actor for Arvin Sloane as well. He did such a great job with him.
Oh, he's amazing. I saw him give an entire interview about how he got his stubble the correct length once. It was like, they were so impressed that it was like, no, I just got a shaver. It does it automatically. It's like, but your beard's so amazing.
Guys, see if you like Commando, can I make a recommendation to y'all? If you haven't read this already. I read this book cover to cover in like a day. I couldn't put it down. The Last Action Heroes. It's the behind-the-scenes story on all the great 80s action movies. Have you heard about it?
No, but like, sign me up for this one.
I'd say it's the best book I've read in 10 years. It's amazing. It basically follows the careers from start to finish of like Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Dolph Lundgren, these guys, and you'll love it. It's written by the guy who edits Empire, Nick DeSemolin. So check it out.
Oh, nice. No, I'd definitely watch that, or I'd definitely read that. Sorry. Is it too late to also mention Scorpius from Farscape, who's
no, it's not.
Fantastic villain.
Yes.
I love him.
Great.
He's charismatic. He's highly intelligent. He's super interesting. When you hear his backstory, he's actually got a really justifiable reason for doing the things he does.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 100% like a greater good kind of guy.
He's got a bit of that vampire dynamic going on where he's almost aristocratic, but when you push him or when he's at his limit, he'll go animalistic, basically.
Yeah.
And there's also...
cool.
Something that ties him, Arvin Sloane, Raymond, like I think probably any good villain is they're able to look at a person and sort of mold them to their will. They will give you what you want, but you will still do what they want in a way, and they will make you want to obey them rather than just being through like fear, which anyone can intimidate somebody. They will make you want to be submissive to them and want to go along with their plan.
Well, like Scorpius 100% breaks John in Farscape like down to his basic elements as a person and still wants more from him. Like brilliant. Yeah, he's remorseless.
the Star Trek movies. A bunch of my pals and I watched recently from start to finish, that 1 to 6, and I'd forgotten how great Christopher Lloyd is as a bad guy in Star Trek 3, like as a Klingon.
Well, MauLer and I had an interesting time watching that one. Like, it's an interesting follow-up to Wrath of Khan, where Khan is like a super interesting villain, whereas Christopher Lloyd's Krug is a bit more straight up in terms of like his motivations and his personality. But Christopher Lloyd plays him so fucking well.
And just that cunning look he's always got. He's always out to do the wrong thing. And you feel great when Kirk kills him later, because you hate him so much by that point. You feel fantastic. Yeah. Murder at the end,
Well, it's when they come across like the photon torpedo that's got all these like microbes crawling around on the outside, but they've mutated into these horrifying snake monster things. And there's no reason for him to do this, but he decides to take one on like in hand-to-hand combat and like fucking squeeze it to death. And there's like he's like got it by the throat, and there's like guts and like blood and stuff pouring out of it, like while it's trying to strangle him. He didn't have to do that, but he's just such a pure badass. He went for it.
I also think one of the good things about like a really good villain is even when they get defeated and they're in the subservient position, they still have there's something about them that enables them to get everyone else essentially to do what they want, but they've always got an extra card to play. They've always got something left up their sleeve, and you see that in Farscape quite a lot. Even when he's in a prison cell, he's actually the one who's still in control of the ship.
Yeah, the Joker has a lot of that shit, sort of, with a lot of their stories. I'm trying to think. A lot of there was a Wayne's era because you had Dark Knight, Skyfall, and Loki from Avengers. All three big budget movies where the villain was put in a cell and was in complete control of the situation. I remember finding that so weird. I was like, man, like everyone's cribbing off each other.
This is a trend.
I did like it in Farscape. It was like, how did you escape? It's like, I could have got out of that cell anytime I wanted. I was only in there voluntarily.
Yeah. I like this one as well from Moses, like Montgomery Burns. He's a good villain. Yeah.
Especially when he tries to literally steal candy from a baby.
And he can't do it, yeah. Ace Archer says, Drinker, have you ever seen the TV series MASH? If you need a laugh as well as thought-provoking drama, you can't do much better than MASH. It has Ace's stamp of approval. Yeah, so it was a little bit before my time, unfortunately, but I do remember watching like the finale just out of curiosity to see what it was, and like, holy shit, that hits hard. That finale was apparently the most watched TV program in all of broadcast history. And there's some pretty intense moments because it is a comedy show and it's very witty and there's like a lot of banter and stuff. But like the fundamental premise is quite a serious one, actually. Like nurses or combat nurses working during the Korean War and like the shit they have to deal with. It's really good stuff.
You should see the MASH movie directed by Robert Altman. It's very good. It's very good.
So was that the prelude to the TV show? Or was that a wrap up for it?
Yes. Well, no, it was the.
Yes to both.
They made the TV show based on the movie.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Which was based on a book originally, wasn't it? I think
it's peak Robert Altman. So very good.
There's only one thing in common with the TV show is the guy who plays Ray Dad O'Reilly. They carried over from
that was it. Only cast member that's
otherwise it's got a different vibe as well, isn't it? Because it's so non-PC. Whereas the MASH TV show is a little bit 1970s, kind of the beginning of political correctness, isn't it? It's a little bit more gentle.
The chat wants me to name a villain. I'm going to say Joker. I particularly like the Killing Joke comic. Killing Joke is amazing.
Well, go on. What do you love about Joker, Chris? Tell us.
I love that he's unpredictable, doesn't care, can kill people. I would say Vader, but he's been so neutered by Disney. It's terrible. I'd love to. Right. I mean, they should have done a Vader TV series where they tell the story of why he's a badass. But Disney would just turn it into a disabled story, like he's disabled and.
Him and Obi-Wan annoyed me.
It would suck. It would suck. Like everything they do.
I get where you're coming from with the Joker thing. Like, I think there's something innately terrifying about a person that you can't predict. you feel like the Joker has no particular morals that he adheres to, and he could do fucking anything at any moment. And he doesn't care if he lives or dies. He is the ultimate terrifying, like chaotic neutral in any situation.
Because even with someone like a Vader who has specific goals and is part of an organization, Joker, there's no leverage you can get over him. Even people like his henchmen or Harley Quinn, he won't care. He's just like, that doesn't change anything. I'm doing whatever I want.
There's a reason that character has survived decades, and there are so many incarnations. Even Cesar Romero, who never shaved the mustache, I thought that was great. But that
was some great makeup work they did on him, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think Vader as a villain will survive what Disney has done to the brand. They've killed it. So that Obi-Wan series was god awful.
God, I hate it.
I'll tell you a weird Joker fact. You know, Joker, like until 2012, there has never been a Batman movie that was in profit that didn't have the Joker in it.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
It's weird, isn't it? People love the Joker. And I think the Joker is what makes Batman an A-list superhero, I think.
Yeah.
So would Batman Forever?
But when the time you counted, I weirdly looked this up, and by the time you counted the marketing budget, it was slightly in the
wow.
And Batman Returns, which is great, but just never really made as much money. And obviously Batman and Robin, a disaster. But even Batman Begins, which is my favorite of all the Batman films, made a loss, which is crazy.
Wow.
It was coming from such a tough place from Batman and Robin, though, you know?
Yeah. I think ideologically, I love the juxtaposition of Batman and Joker. Like they are the perfect foil for each other. Like I know obviously greater minds than mine have obviously like come to this conclusion, which is why the comics were so successful. But I think they just play off each other perfectly. Like the man who just stands for nothing and desires nothing but chaos, who could do anything at any moment, versus the rigid pursuit of justice, the man who will stop at nothing to fight the criminals, to serve justice upon anyone who has wronged the citizens of Gotham, who very much has a strict moral code. What a perfect pair of characters to play off against each other, and the way they can test each other is brilliant. Like you can see why they've had such a incredible longevity. Because you're talking like from the 1940s up until now, essentially, they've been going at it. And they're still finding new ways for these characters to explore each other's strengths and weaknesses. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll do a couple more before finishing up. Michael Brocky, I'll always love and show up for Downey, even though I know why Disney is doing this. A part of me was still hoping that he'd stay away after Tony's perfect end. No one's ever gone, really. We had Logan, Hugh Jackman came back. We had Endgame, Robert Downey Jr. has come back.
I thought it was funny. People posted about how it was like, these scenes mean nothing now of the end of Logan and the end of Endgame. I saw someone quote tweet that saying, that's like saying this scene means nothing. And they had when Loki dies in Infinity War. And I saw that. I was like,
little did you know.
Like, it does mean nothing. It's because they were trying to say it's like the Loki series didn't ruin this. I was like, it kind of did. Like, it was that was a particularly punchy scene in Infinity War. And I mean, Loki did more damage than undermining Loki's death. You know what I mean? The show, it obviously the Infinity Stone shell draw thing, but yeah, the MCU's in a weird spot, man.
I think it's also just done badly. Like Star Trek did the same thing where there's a transporter accident with Riker, and like the signal gets bounced back, so you essentially end up with two Rikers in the same time period, and one lives through a different thing. So he essentially turns up at like evil, whereas the other guy lived the life that the other guy wanted. And exploring that kind of thing is interesting, but it has to be done intelligently. And it just seems everything that's done now is blunt. It's basic. There's no depth to it. And so I think a lot of the ideas, they can come across as bad, but it's only because they're just done in the worst way possible. Yeah.
Well, because it's funny you bring up what you just said. You were triggering my memory of Farscape, where John gets cloned.
Yes.
And you know, and one of them has a particularly effective end to his story, while the other one doesn't. And it's like that's a way to have that payoff without damaging.
And they get
anything.
Jealous of each other because of who they're hanging around. Yeah.
And then, of course, you could cite Spock rewatching Wrath of Khan, knowing the future does not undermine how effective that scene is. So it's yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with you. It's really about execution.
Guys, I'll have to clock off a couple of minutes early. I just got an email from one of my children in the cellar, as weird as this sounds, right? But the kids are finding their bedrooms too hot in the summer. And tonight their big idea was to sleep downstairs in the cellar. And one of them just emailed me and said they're pretty scared down there in their own. They're watching Lord of the Rings, the original Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings, down in the cellar.
How can you be scared of anything when you're watching that? That should give you courage for life.
So I'm going to go down and lie with them for a bit so they calm down, but I've just seen a couple of emails come through. But listen, guys,
it's speaker at the top of the stairs and start playing horror music.
I should come down with an axe. Guys, great to see you all, and I better scoot.
Take care, Mark.
All the best.
Thank you, Mark.
See you, dude.
Pleasure.
Thanks. Yeah, I got to run soon. A drink or two.
No, I think I'm going to finish it up there actually because we've been going for a fair old time. So yeah, I'm going to finish this stream here. I want to say to you guys, to Disparu, Chris, MauLer, and to Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure having all of you on tonight, as always. And yeah, thank you to everyone who's tuned in for this tonight. Hopefully, we haven't missed any of your member chats. I'm going to look for ways that I can find any ones that slip through the gaps so that we don't do this, because it is annoying if members of the channel post their super chats or whatever and we miss them somehow. So we'll keep an eye out for that. But thank you everyone that's joined us for this one tonight, and thank you to my mods for doing the usual awesome work that they always do. But for now, tonight, that is all we've got for today. So go away now.
Bye.
Bye.